Life doesn't always go the way we expect. I spent nearly 30 years climbing the corporate ladder in middle management, feeling secure in my career. But the economy proved far more unpredictable than I could have imagined. The downturn came quickly, and soon the company that seemed so stable was shrinking rapidly. I could see what was coming, but I felt powerless to stop it. As my career unraveled, I tried to keep things steady at home. I didn't want to burden my second wife, Kathy, with my troubles, especially since her real estate business was also suffering. She was barely scraping by, closing only a few sales here and there. Both of us were struggling in our separate worlds, not fully aware of the personal storms we were each dealing with. At 50, I found myself back in school, a path I never expected to take. After nearly 3 decades with the same company, I was blindsided by the sudden layoffs. The severance I received wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Our house and cars were paid off, so we weren't in terrible shape financially, but it still felt like a huge shift in my life. Kathy was also struggling, but she stayed hopeful. "Things are getting better," she'd say after finally landing a few showings. One day I decided to surprise her with lunch. I checked her first appointment, but didn't find her there. I eventually spotted her car at her most expensive listing, a huge estate that could have brought in a big commission. When I walked in quietly, I didn't want to disturb her with a client. But then I found her in the kitchen with a man. He had his pants down and she was on her knees. They were laughing and he was making crude comments while she smiled up at him. I stood frozen for a moment, then pulled out my phone and started recording. Once I had enough, I couldn't hold back my anger. I confronted the man, firmly grabbing his collar, but quickly realized that aggression was not the answer and chose to walk away. Kathy, shocked, ran out, leaving her blouse open behind her. The man was still moaning on the ground when I took his wallet, got his name, and told him I'd see him in court. He begged me not to ruin his family, admitting he wasn't the first man Kathy had done this with. He gave me a friend's name to back up his story. After that, I never spoke to Kathy again, except during the divorce. She sent me a long letter of apology, claiming she had done it to save her business. I didn't bother reading past the first page before throwing it away. I tried to keep things civil during the divorce until Kathy realized I wasn't coming back. Then she turned difficult. At our meeting with her lawyer, I handed over the photos and said, "If she fights me, these go public. I've found 2 more men she's used her sales techniques on. This is still an alienation of affection state, and the lawsuits from their wives could ruin her. She'll likely lose her real estate license, and even if she keeps it, no one around here will hire her." I gave them an ultimatum. This deal isn't bad, and it's her only shot. I want a decision by the end of the day. Her lawyer called just before the deadline. She had no choice but to agree. I wouldn't live in the house again, so she had to buy me out or sell it. She was furious when I told her she couldn't be the one to sell it. To raise the money, she had to sell her sailboat and Mustang. Rumors spread despite my efforts to keep things quiet, and she started having trouble getting listings. Once the divorce was final, I moved away. I found a great deal on a foreclosure, thanks to what I'd learned from Kathy. It was a 3-bedroom house on 9 acres with a barn and outbuildings. Way more than I needed, but I figured I could sell it for a profit later. When I met with an employment counselor, they laid out the harsh reality. The job market here is even tougher, and not having a degree is holding you back. You should consider going back to school. You only need about 1.5 years to finish your degree, and we'll cover tuition and books. With nothing to lose, I enrolled in a community college that had a partnership with a university, so I could eventually get a 4-year degree. Most of the students were older, like me, trying to improve their lives. I even made some friends and started dating, sometimes women younger than my 2 sons from my first marriage. My ex-wife had cheated too, but the boys were older by then, and we still had a good relationship. In my last semester, I took a workshop on starting small businesses. The final project was to create and market a fake business. Our instructor paired us in teams with people we had little in common with, thinking it would spark creativity. My partner, Gail, was a fashion major about 20 years younger than me. She was smart, but inexperienced. I invited Gail and a few other teams over to my place for a brainstorming session. After we hit a wall with ideas, we stopped trying and started drinking. I made sure everyone had a safe spot to sleep. Gail and I ended up talking about fashion and branding. She brought up how brands like Members Only and Izod made fortunes through smart marketing, even when the products weren't that great. We joked around, looking at our friends on the couch. "What about redneck chic?" I asked. Gail laughed. "We'd have to brand it." Looking at my friend's Aeropostale sweatshirt, I said, "How about Air Raccoon?" She burst out laughing. "And jeans, lardash!" We joked back and forth until Gail headed to bed. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. That's when it hit me. We had our fake business idea. My administrative and marketing skills would pair perfectly with her fashion and production expertise. I made coffee, and Gail helped with breakfast. As everyone else slowly woke up, some ate while others just nursed their coffee and juice. I asked Gail to stay after everyone left, and I shared my idea. She grinned. I was thinking the same thing. She designed a logo of a raccoon, but something was missing. Then it came to me. Wings. It's Air Raccoon after all. She agreed and adjusted the design, and it looked much better. She also created the Lardash logo, a cheeky design shaped like two bum cheeks for the rear pocket. We now had a design, business plan, and marketing strategy. Time to move forward. Gail didn't have money but had the talent for production. I could handle the rest. Later, I asked her, wouldn't it be great to have real products, not just graphics? What do we need? She explained we'd need a professional programmable monogram machine, costing anywhere from $7,000 to $15,000 new, or less if we found a used one. That's more than I thought, I said, but it's doable. Gail, how about this? I'll fund the startup, you handle design and production, and I'll take care of the rest. She thought about it for just a moment and agreed. I hired a lawyer to draw up a fair deal. The company would be called Redneck Chic Clothing Company, and I'd own the trademarks for Air Raccoon, while Gail would own the Lardash trademark. Since I was funding everything, I got 65%, and Gail got 35%. She wasn't thrilled with the split, but eventually agreed, knowing I could easily replace her. We found a $12,000 machine for $4,000 from a seller desperate to unload it, and had it delivered to my garage. After some training, Gail was thrilled and got to work. We bought 6 dozen assorted t-shirts, men's in black and dark red, women's in pink, yellow, and gray, plus black and white hats. Gail programmed the machine, and soon it was running, stitching our logos in a blend of silver, white, and black threads. The wings on the raccoon had a gossamer look exactly as we envisioned. We had Alice, Jamie, and some friends model the clothes. Gail insisted on getting an overlock machine to sew prototype jeans, which wasn't as pricey as the monogrammer. We even got help from some students in the TV and radio department to make a commercial. The ad featured Alice wearing our work jeans and Air Raccoon shirt, helping Jamie on the farm. Later, she wore the dressier version with a pink shirt, confidently looking into the camera. The tagline, Lardash jeans, definitely not for little girls. The instructor was shocked by our success, and we aced the course. More importantly, we started getting real product requests and built a strong local following. Gail and I had different ideas about the business, but we agreed on many key points. I had a 48x36 metal building on my property, so we applied for a zoning waiver as a cottage industry, got approved, and remodeled it. We added insulation, a heat pump, a 2-stall bathroom, and a break room. We installed 12 new Melcro machines and advertised for employees. We were fortunate. The area had a history of textile work, so there were many skilled sewers. We received 900 applications for just 12 positions. We tested each candidate, ensuring they could handle the machines. By the end of the week, we had 11 hires. The last hire came unexpectedly, a woman in her 60s named Mavis. She didn't apply formally, but showed up asking for a chance. She had 50 years of experience sewing everything from shirts to sails and was in desperate need of work after her husband passed. Despite not knowing the machines, she was confident she could figure it out. I gave her a shot, and she teared up with gratitude. Gail wasn't thrilled at first, but was impressed by how quickly Mavis learned. She mastered the basics in 3 hours. We paid employees minimum wage plus a production bonus if they operated the machines at 80% efficiency, averaging $9 an hour. We couldn't offer full insurance, but arranged a deal for 4 doctor visits a year for $20 and up to 3 free generic prescriptions. It wasn't much, but the workers appreciated the effort. Most of them were middle-aged, with experience in the textile industry. Mavis naturally became the floor manager, acting like a grandmother and motivator to the team. We had each employee make a shirt in all 5 colors, with their names monogrammed, which became their uniforms. They voted to work 9-hour days Monday through Thursday and 4 hours on Friday, with overtime available if needed. Birthdays were celebrated with a party, paid day off, or extra pay, and we always gave a nice gift. Mavis got a 19-inch flat screen, a Blu-ray player, and a year of Netflix as a birthday gift. She cried for an hour before heading home. Gail grumbled about the cost, as money was starting to become her focus. For a year, we kept expanding, adding a mini shift of college kids working nights and Saturdays, but still couldn't keep up. Eventually, I told Gail we needed to find a bigger facility. "How big?" she asked, trying to hide her excitement. After reviewing projections for a month, I replied, "Big enough for at least 100 machines and space for your jeans line. We might need 2 buildings." Gail was thrilled. We found a large facility and a smaller one nearby. We planned to bring in 25 machines at a time with a full setup in a year. Gail began shopping for overlock sewing machines to start the jeans production. The business had grown too big for us to handle alone. We needed managers for the plant, production, office, HR, and accounting. Our original workers were nervous about the changes, fearing the loss of the informal environment they liked. I reassured them during a meeting. "We're not moving you. Your jobs are safe. I'll still be around, and Mavis Turner will manage day-to-day operations starting Monday." Everyone cheered. Mavis was a natural leader and had already been solving many floor problems. She was hesitant at first, but accepted the role when I doubled her pay. I also gave all the original workers a bonus of 2 weeks' pay as a thank you. Gail thought I was spoiling them, but I believed in investing in loyalty. The real branding breakthrough came from Mavis. Her great-nephew, a race car driver, had just moved up to the Busch Series, the equivalent of AAA in baseball. He was one of the few black racers on the circuit. Mavis asked for a day off to see him, and I had an idea. "I'll give you the day off with pay if you bring him by for lunch. I'll treat everyone if I can have a few minutes alone with him." She was thrilled, and I saw a golden opportunity for our brand. I did some research on Mavis's nephew. He had a solid racing record and was well-liked. He was married with 1 child, and his wife was on the plus side, which aligned well with our brand. When Mavis brought him in, he was friendly, posed for photos, and made everyone laugh, gaining some loyal fans that day. Later, I got him alone in my office. "How'd you get into racing?" I asked. He explained his dad had been a mechanic who dabbled in dirt track racing. He started with go-karts at age 10 and moved on to dirt track cars by 15. Now he was set to race in the Busch Series. I was impressed. "How do you think you'll do with the right sponsorship?" "We're running on a tight budget, but I should do all right." I cut to the chase. "Let's talk business. My company's growing, but we're not there yet. Send me some numbers to get a raccoon on your car. In the meantime, how about doing some ads for us, you and your wife? We'll pay you the going rate and work sponsorship into the deal later. Think about it." I knew I was in over my head. I went to see my old professor, the one who'd helped me start this journey. He was happy to see me, and even introduced me to his class as a success story. Afterward, over coffee, I asked if he was really retiring. "Yes, after the semester," he said. I smiled. "No, you're not. You're going to be vice president of development at Redneck Chic Clothing." He was stunned. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely. I need your connections in the academic and business world. Start building a team. We'll discuss salary later." I had already talked to Gail, and she was so focused on setting up the jeans factory, she agreed without hesitation. We also got lucky with new hires. My oldest son had just been downsized, so I hired him as our controller. He and his pregnant wife moved into a house I leased as a signing bonus. She became my personal assistant. Gail then introduced me to her aunt Amaryllis, who preferred to be called Amy. At 46, she was fit, professional, and very attractive. Without realizing it, I had hired her as our office manager. I figured even if she wasn't the best at the job, it'd be nice to have her around. Sexist, I know. Finally, my youngest son joined us as our materials manager. We didn't need a warehouse yet, but with bigger plans on the horizon, it was only a matter of time. We held a meeting with the key team: Gail, Amy, Ralph, my old professor Barry, our lawyer Greg, my son Jerry, and me. We needed to establish a chain of command to expand the company nationally. I was named CEO. Gail became VP of the jeans division. Ralph would manage the t-shirt plant. Greg and Amy would oversee the office, and Jerry would focus on streamlining materials and potential warehouse issues. Debbie, Greg's wife, would help with expansion projects. We set salaries and agreed on profit sharing, though there were no ownership options yet. Our sales were booming, and we struggled to keep up. The first 25 machines were online, and for a brief time, we were ahead of schedule. Betty, one of the original workers, was promoted to manage the new section. Barry suggested we incorporate and consider going public, but I wasn't thrilled about it, especially since we didn't manufacture our own shirts, which were foreign-made. Jerry came to me with an idea. Why not make our own shirts in the U.S.? He explained there were plenty of empty factories and skilled workers, plus government incentives to hire older workers. After reviewing the costs, we found it would add about 75 cents per shirt. Gail and Barry weren't on board, but both sons, Amy and Ralph, thought it was worth exploring, especially with the Made in America appeal. Debbie had just given birth to our first granddaughter, so she couldn't travel. I went with Jerry and Amy to visit potential locations. We found a perfect mid-sized building in a rural area that used to be a shirt factory. The local governments offered grants and incentives, making it an attractive option. However, Gail strongly opposed it, pushing for outsourcing to China for higher profits. I refused, saying, "This company will never move out of the country. It's about pride, not just profit." Jerry later pointed out that even if we made shirts here, the fabric would still come from China. However, he had a solution. A nearby American fabric plant that could meet our needs, adding about 50 cents per shirt, but making the product 100% American-made. Together, these changes would increase costs by $1.25 per shirt. Ralph and Amy supported raising prices to match the higher quality. Gail continued to object as she sourced her denim cheaply from Malaysia, boosting her division's profits. We started to disagree more frequently. At 24, Gail had changed. She wore designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and drove a Lexus. Her focus had shifted, and it was clear that money was clouding her judgment. Since Debbie ran errands for me, I gave her my company SUV and drove my truck to work. Ralph got the same SUV model, thinking we'd get a better deal buying two. Amy called me for a meeting. She had taken over HR after our original hire got caught in a pill sting, which we didn't expect. At 53, Amy had the right qualifications and was now managing HR for 225 hourly workers and 40 salaried employees across our operations. It was time to implement a health plan. Amy invited me to the sewing plant, where she had been staffing the operation for 6 weeks. The plant was almost ready to produce its first shirts, though still not fully staffed. I flew in on Friday to check on the progress. Amy greeted me with a big hug at the airport, and I realized how long it had been since my last relationship. It had been 4 years since my split from Kathy, and 3 since we started the company. I hadn't dated in almost 2 years. Noticing me glance at her, Amy teased, "What are you doing?" I blushed. "Just enjoying the view." She laughed, joking that some people thought I might be gay. We arrived at the plant, where I noticed tents and a crowd gathered. It turned out to be our first annual company picnic. Amy introduced me to the employees as the founder and CEO, and I was touched by the applause. I made sure to talk to each employee and their families. The highlight was when the oldest employee, a 67-year-old grandmother, presented me with the first shirt made at the plant. I had it monogrammed by Mavis, framed and hung in my office. The company was thriving. Greg kept our finances stable, and Mavis and her team worked on new product designs, including a long tail line of collared shirts with a larger raccoon logo. We were also developing jackets with an even bigger logo. Mavis, now 65, even made a stuffed raccoon toy for her granddaughter, complete with wings. During a rare half-day off, I stopped by to see Mavis, who admitted she missed sewing but was proud of her work. When I asked about her retirement plans, she hugged me and said, "Not until you run me out. I've never been happier and am so grateful for this opportunity." I smiled and replied, "You'll probably outlast me." I was captivated by the stuffed raccoon Mavis made, so I had her make one for my granddaughter, which became her favorite toy. Mavis even made one for me that I kept on my desk. After a year of seeing it, I realized the potential. No stuffed animals were made in the U.S. anymore. I put Jerry in charge, and a month later he had a plan. We set up a small factory with 14 employees using older machines, which produced high-quality toys. Gail opposed the idea, but I made the factory independent and owned solely by me under the Redneck Chic license, which appeased her. Since Mavis designed the raccoon, I gave her 25 cents per toy sold, and her quarterly checks rivaled her salary. Gail, now mostly at the jeans plant, had a new boyfriend, and Greg wasn't impressed with him. Meanwhile, we signed Will Turner, Mavis's nephew and a rising race car driver, and his wife Mary as endorsers. Initially hesitant, Mary eventually embraced our brand, modeling our jeans and shirts. Will promoted our products at the racetrack, handing out hats and shirts, and even launched our long tail line. When we raised prices after going all-American, sales dipped briefly, so I posted a video explaining the price hike and used the phrase, "How much is your country worth to you?" Sales quickly rebounded. The stuffed raccoons became a hit, and we donated them to factory workers and local hospitals. ESPN featured Will handing out toys, nicknaming him the Raccoon Fairy, which caught on among his fans and fellow drivers. His car even featured the raccoon logo, boosting his popularity, especially with kids. As demand grew, we doubled the toy production. However, the stress of expanding the company and long work hours caught up to me, and I collapsed from exhaustion. My doctor warned me to start exercising and delegating more, or I'd face serious health issues. Surrounded by my family and team in the hospital, I realized it was time to make some changes. Debbie and Maria gave me a hard time, saying I needed to live long enough to meet my grandson due in 6 months. Maria also revealed she was pregnant, showing me her engagement ring and teasing, "You've got a lot to live for, old man." They joked that I needed a wife to keep me alive long enough to nag me to end of life. Amy and others stopped by, and Ralph and Barry teased me about taking it easy. What surprised me most was Amy, who was emotional and scolded me for not realizing how many people depended on me. Mavis, too, hugged me tightly, crying and making me promise to take care of myself. After 3 days in the hospital, I returned to the office where production stopped as everyone hugged me. Amy and Mavis then set up a schedule where I would work until lunchtime, then go home to rest. Amy often joined me for lunch to ensure I ate healthy, keeping me from indulging in fast food. I came to enjoy these lunches, especially since Amy and I hadn't spent much time together before. We talked about our lives, and I shared my experiences with failed marriages due to cheating. Amy opened up about her own divorce 6 years ago, sharing her hatred for cheaters and how she was glad to be rid of her ex-husband. I asked if she was seeing anyone, and she joked that her boss kept her too busy for a relationship. I laughed and admitted that while I had once sworn off marriage, I was rethinking it, believing that I could eventually find the right woman. The conversation shifted when Amy mentioned Gail's talk of moving the jeans operation to China. Gail had been spending more time at the main office and was engaged to someone Amy didn't like. Gail seemed frustrated with being a business owner instead of pursuing her original dream of being a fashion designer, and she still resented not getting a 50-50th split when we set up the business. I was surprised, as I had felt 35% was generous, considering I came up with the concept, name, and funding. It made me think that perhaps it was time for us to part ways. Amy seemed surprised, especially since Gail was her niece. "I don't think that's a good idea. Gail needs your guidance, and she wouldn't do nearly as well on her own," I grunted. "Just talking, but make sure she knows. No part of my company is going to China. We're making good money, and 300 Americans depend on us, not counting our suppliers." Amy nodded. "I'll tell her, but if she pushes, do what's best for the company. I trust you to make the right call." She held my hand for a moment before realizing and pulling back. We promoted Jerry to help with daily operations, and Ralph took on more of my duties. Since I was working half days, Debbie became Ralph's assistant. I knew something was up when Greg invited me to lunch on Sunday. Both Debbie and Maria were pregnant. Debbie was 7.5 months along, and Maria was 5.5 months. During a quiet meal, I finally asked, "What's going on?" The women left, and the boys hesitated before telling me the issue. "Dad, Mom is in bad shape. She lost her job, caught her husband cheating, and her house is in foreclosure. Can we help her?" Greg explained they had found her an apartment and would cover the first year's rent and utilities, while Jerry would add her to his phone plan. Then Jerry added, "She needs a job. Gail's assistant just quit, and we think she'd be a good fit. Gail might be more polite since she's our mom." I didn't like the idea, but reluctantly agreed. "Fine, but keep her away from me. If she causes problems, she's out." The boys were relieved. "Thanks, Pop. You won't even know she's there." Maria and Debbie hugged me, clearly happy with my decision. Maria said, "You're a good man, Papacita." Debbie whispered her thanks, adding that she'd been against letting Rosalind move in with them. I told Amy about it at lunch on Tuesday. She wasn't thrilled. "Are you sure? You don't need more stress?" "I'll manage. She's their mother, and Gail will keep her busy." Amy laughed. Gail wasn't happy, but I used all my HR skills to get her to accept it. She's calmed down a bit since. Rosalind arrived the next week and immediately started complaining. Her apartment was too small, the commute was too long, and she didn't like Gail. Greg and Jerry had a talk with her. "We're doing our best, Mom. If you don't like the apartment, you can move, but you'll have to pay your own rent. Gail can be tough, but maybe you can be a good influence. If you can't handle it, we'll help you find another job." That shut her up. She knew she wouldn't find a better job, and the thought of paying her own way didn't appeal to her. I saw her 2 weeks later at a meeting. She'd gained some weight, had shorter hair, but still had those striking blue eyes. She greeted me. "Zach, how are you?" "I'm fine, Roz. How have you been?" She didn't like being called Roz, but she kept calm. "I've had better days. Thanks for your help. It means a lot to me and the boys. So, how do you like being a rich business owner?" "A bit different from what we imagined years ago." I smiled. "Didn't expect a crowd of grandkids either. Can't wait to meet our grandsons." Before I could say more, Amy walked over and put her hand on my arm. There was some silent tension between her and Rosalind, like a mental standoff. Amy then said, "Time to start the meeting, Zach. Let's keep it short. I want to try that new Mexican place for lunch." She addressed Rosalind with a dismissive, "Rosalind," and I saw Rosalind tense up. Trying to lighten things, I said, "Let's get to business. I'll see you at Jerry's house for lunch on Sunday." Amy gripped my arm tighter when I mentioned it, and I began wondering, was she jealous? During lunch, I caught Amy's eye a few times. She asked, "What, do I have food on my blouse?" "No, just a question. Do we still contribute to the Giles Center? If so, can you get me 2 tickets to Jersey Boys?" She nodded. "I'm sure I can arrange that." "Great. Now a business question. If I take an employee as a date, would that be an issue?" She looked serious. "I wouldn't recommend it. Relationships with employees can lead to trouble, especially if they end badly. Don't mix business and personal life, Zach." I pretended to be disappointed. "Too bad. I was hoping you'd go with me. I know you love musicals." She nearly choked on her tea before recovering. "You'll pick me up at 6. We'll have dinner at a nice restaurant I choose, and we'll attend the show as corporate officers, supporting the center. This is strictly a business event, not a date. Clear?" "So that's a yes?" I asked. "Yes, now finish your lunch. And don't touch the salt shaker or you won't be able to applaud on Friday." I sent her flowers on Friday with a card reading, "In appreciation of a loyal employee." Strictly business, of course. Debbie heard about the flowers and confronted me. "Flowers for Amy? You romantic." I tried to downplay it. "Just a gesture of appreciation." Before she could say more, Maria burst in. "Is it true?" she asked Debbie, who nodded. Maria grinned and said, "Just so you know, Amy took a half-day vacation, so did we. We're going for a spa treatment and shopping. You better appreciate this." Maria cut me off. "Give it up, Pop. She's been into you for about a year. She nearly collapsed when you got sick. Men are clueless. I've seen how you look at her when she's not looking. You want her just as much." Debbie jumped in. "Don't screw this up. If you do, Sunday lunches with your grandkids will be a thing of the past." I leaned back and smiled. "What happened to my right to privacy?" "Long gone. Good luck, Papacita." Maria laughed as she and Debbie left. I sent Amy flowers Friday morning with a card that read, "In appreciation of a loyal employee." Strictly business, of course. Within 45 minutes, Debbie stormed into my office. "Flowers for Amy? You romantic," she teased. I shrugged. "Just a gesture of appreciation, no big deal." Maria then charged in, grinning. "She took a half-day vacation, Pop. So did we. We're all going for a spa day, followed by shopping. You better appreciate it." I tried to protest, but Maria cut me off. "Face it, Pop. She's into you, and you want her too." Debbie added, "Don't blow this. You need her, and she needs you. Plus, we could use a better mother-in-law." I gave in. "Anything else?" Maria checked her watch. "Yeah, Greg and Jerry are coming to take you shopping for a new suit. You're not wearing that old stuff. And forget your truck. A limo will pick you up. This non-date is going to cost you, but you're rich. You're welcome." Greg and Jerry walked in just as she finished, and everyone laughed, except me. "Let's get you a suit that's actually from this decade," they said. I sat in the limo, feeling like a nervous teenager on a first date. When I got to Amy's house, I admired her well-kept yard. Neat, attractive, and beautiful, just like her. When she opened the door, I was speechless. She wore a perfect little black dress, conservative yet sexy, knee-length, and perfectly fitted to her curves. Her hair was styled in an elegant semi-bun, understated but alluring. She let me squirm for a moment before saying, "For God's sake, Zach, say something." I blurted out, "You're so beautiful." She blushed and giggled. "Thank you. Glad to know your daughters-in-law's efforts weren't wasted. I feel like a princess." I smiled. "They're getting upgraded in the will, and I mean it. You're beautiful. Come, princess. Your carriage awaits." She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, took my arm, and we headed out. We went to a new Thai restaurant. Amy loved spicy food, but I couldn't handle it as well. She ordered both spicy and mild dishes, feeding me small bites while I wiped my brow. Afterward, we walked to the venue on the warm evening, and I got used to the feel of her hand on my arm. The performance was excellent, and we had some of the best seats in the house. She held my hand the entire time. Afterward, she said, "Thank you so much for tonight. I loved it." "Me too. Too bad it's over," I replied. She stopped. "Over? Who said that? I'm keeping you up past your bedtime, and if you're lucky, I might tuck you in." I blushed, and she laughed. We went to a club that catered to our age group, with a Beatles tribute band playing. She excused herself, and when she returned, Her hair was down for the first time, long and beautiful. We sipped drinks and enjoyed the music. She was itching to dance, so I asked, "Wanna?" and she dragged me onto the floor. I wasn't great at dancing, but the slow dances made up for it. She pressed close to me, and we took breaks for me to catch my breath. At one point, her friends Jerry and Sky stopped by. Sky's ankle hurt, so I asked Jerry to dance with Amy. She looked at me, and I nodded, watching her dance happily. After a few fast songs, they returned when a slow one began. "Thank you," she said. "Most men would be jealous," I smiled. "They're your friends, and I want you to have fun. But if it were a stranger, I'd expect you to say no. If you're with me, you're with me." She giggled. "I'm with you, honey." We had coffee with them afterward, and they gave us a card for their dance studio. Before we left, we signed up for lessons. In the limo, I told her, "You don't need lessons. I used to teach part-time. It'll be fun, and dancing with the same partner makes you better. Plus, it'll get you in shape, better than bowling," she said with a smile. I didn't mess things up by trying to come in after walking Amy to her door. I did get a few nice kisses, which was enough for now. On Sunday, before Rosalind arrived, the girls teased me, and the guys asked if I'd scored, while their wives playfully scolded them. When Rosalind arrived and saw the smiles, she asked, "What's everyone so happy about?" Jerry grinned and said, "Pop went on his first date in over 2 years and had a great time." It wasn't entirely true, but no one corrected him. Rosalind didn't seem amused, which dampened the mood until Ashley, their 2-year-old, woke up and lightened the atmosphere. Rosalind noticed Ashley's raccoon toy and commented, "How cute! It looks familiar." Jerry explained, "It's from our company. We make them near the shirt factory and sell them online and in select stores. We've sold quite a few." Rosalind rolled her eyes. "Great, more money for you." Jerry, clearly offended, explained, "Actually, it's a non-profit foundation. Every dollar after costs goes to the Wounded Warrior Foundation to help disabled veterans with things like ramps, guide dogs, and housing modifications." I wished he hadn't mentioned it. We didn't do it for the recognition. It all started when Jerry's best friend, who lost both legs in Afghanistan, needed help. We built ramps for his house, and it led to the idea of creating the foundation. Gail insisted we keep it separate from the business so it wouldn't affect her earnings. Bob, Jerry's friend, now works for us and oversees donations. Rosalind apologized, and the rest of the afternoon went smoothly. On Monday, I received an email outlining the events I'd be attending to represent the company. Fridays and Saturdays would be busy for a while. I was still working half days and considering making it permanent. Amy joined me and Mavis for lunch, but didn't bring up the weekend. She asked if I'd seen the memo about more community involvement, which I had. When Amy kissed me goodbye and called me honey, Mavis's eyes widened, and she immediately pounced. "So, you and Amy? About time. She loves you, you know." I raised my hands. "We're just friends. No one's talking marriage." Mavis gave me a look. "Uh-huh. Well, when that wedding happens, I'll be sitting on the groom's side." Later, Mavis hinted that she and the girls were working on something but wouldn't tell me what. On Friday, she made sure Amy was with me for lunch, and I knew something was up. After lunch, Mavis invited me to the shop, where the girls were grinning. "You told us to experiment, so we did," Mavis said. "Get ready for a fashion show." The fashion show was mostly grandchildren, ranging from 8 months to 6 years, all wearing clothes with our logo. I'd thought about a children's line before, but never had time to develop it. Mavis knocked me to it, and I was impressed. The designs were clever, like a jumper on the 8-month-old with a raccoon in diapers and a dress on a 6-year-old featuring a mother raccoon with her babies. Debbie's daughter Ashley wore red overalls with raccoon heads on the bib. We introduced the baby raccoon line online, and it sold out in 2 weeks. Everyone loved it, except Gail, who stormed into my house while Amy and I were having lunch, furious. "You a-hole, I'm the designer," she yelled. We were stunned. I tried to reason with her. "No one's undermining you. I asked about a kids' line 2 years ago and you focused on jeans. Now feel free to design as much as you want." She ranted some more and left. Amy sighed. She's losing it. Her husband's spending money they don't have, and she can't say no. He knows she has millions, but doesn't understand the difference between working millions and spending millions. Worse, he talked her out of a prenup. I was shocked. There's a clause in our agreement that requires a prenup to protect the business. What was she thinking? Meanwhile, things between Amy and me progressed nicely. We attended concerts, plays, and sporting events, including races. Will was winning consistently and had a shot at Rookie of the Year in NASCAR. We expanded our monogramming and shirt factories to keep up with demand, and Forbes featured us on the cover as a true American success story. As Amy and I grew closer, Gail's marriage began to deteriorate. I could sense trouble coming. We attended the annual picnic at the shirt factory. The food was great, and the employees, mostly women, competed fiercely in the dessert contest. Prizes ranged from $50 to $250, and the winner was a coconut cake. The local mayor and county commissioners judged the contest, and the event made the local papers, along with a few photos of Amy and me goofing around. One photo showed me smearing cake on her face, and another caught her kissing me in revenge. The caption identified us as the company's owner and his wife, which the kids found amusing. At the hotel afterward, I was surprised when the clerk gave Amy and me key cards to the same room. Before I could protest, she hurried me along. I got tired of waiting. If I left it to you, we'd be in walkers before anything happened. Now don't screw this up. It had been a long, dry spell, and Amy made up for lost time that night. I managed 2 performances and a third at 6 a.m. The dance lessons had definitely helped. Amy outshone both my ex-wives in every way, throwing herself completely into our time together. At 50, Amy was still trim and beautiful. She made me wait in the living room while she changed, and when she finally emerged, she was wearing a sheer teddy robe and high heels. She twirled, teasing me. "Do you like this?" she asked. Once I regained my speech, I said, "You're beautiful, but it would look even better off you." She giggled. "Then it's only fair you take it off." We made love again, and afterward, I held her until she fell asleep. The next morning, we showered together and made it to breakfast with the family. Debbie teased Amy, saying she was glowing, while Greg joked that I looked like I didn't get enough sleep. They all laughed, but I surprised them by announcing we were staying a few more days. I wanted to visit the toy factory and spend more time with Amy. Mission accomplished. On the flight home, I asked, "How long until you move in?" Amy smiled, taking my hand. "I plan to spend a lot of time in your bed, but I'm not moving in right away. We need to make sure everything's right. And just so you know, I'm an old-fashioned marriage kind of woman." "Does that scare you?" I replied. "The only thing that scares me is not being the one you want." She held my hand for the rest of the flight. The first night home without her was rough. I kept waking up, reaching for her. The next day, we struggled through lunch with Mavis, who quickly caught on. Later, Amy promised to bring a suitcase over, just in case. She decided to stay more often. A week later, Rosalind unexpectedly showed up at my office. She wanted to talk, but I told her to get to the point. After some fidgeting, she finally began reminiscing about our past and asked if we could start over. I cut her off, reminding her of her affair, the hurtful things she said, and how she tried to screw me over in the divorce. I told her that too much had happened and that we couldn't go back. I advised her to be grateful for what she had. Before I could say more, Amy walked in and coolly acknowledged Rosalind. "Lunchtime, honey. Should we have Mexican delivered to the house later so we can relax?" Rosalind sat speechless, and I couldn't help but enjoy it. Taking Amy's hand, I said, "Roz and I were just talking about old times, but I'll save the rest for another day. See you Sunday." We left before Rosalind could react. At lunch, Amy noticed the look on my face. "What's on your mind?" "Everyone knows we're together. I knew she was in your office as soon as your door closed. She needs to learn I don't share. If she thinks otherwise, she needs to find a new playground. I protect what's mine." I grinned. "So, I'm yours?" Her expression softened. "Yes, you've been mine since the hospital when I realized I was falling for you. Can you handle that?" "I'm out of my league, but I'll spend as long as it takes to make you happy." She ran to the restroom in tears, but her kiss when she returned told me I hadn't messed up. I started looking for a ring while she talked about redecorating. I told her anything was fine as long as she left my office alone. We were both happy. 2 weeks later, while I was browsing honeymoon brochures, my secretary called. "There's a woman here who says she's your wife." I was confused. Everyone knew Rosalind by now, and Amy hadn't said yes yet. I thought it was a joke until Kathy walked in. "Hi, Zach. Surprised?" she asked, dressed to impress. "More like disappointed. Why are you here?" Her smile faded. "I wanted to apologize. Remember my letter?" "I never read past the first line." "Why?" she asked, trying to stay composed. "Because I was in too much pain. I loved you for 6 years, but then I found out you'd been sleeping with clients for commissions. That's what some people call being paid for sex." She struggled to control her temper. "What do you want, Kathy?" She admitted she was broke, having sold her house to keep her business afloat, but it failed anyway. Rumors about her spread, and she lost clients. Now she had no money left and asked for help. Part of me felt some satisfaction, but another part felt pity. I wrote her a check. This is for the good years we had, but you need to leave town. I'm proposing to my girlfriend today, and I love her more than I thought possible. I'll try to remember our good times. Her eyes widened at the check, but I cut her off when she tried to thank me. Just take it. I wouldn't be here if you hadn't betrayed me. Your actions pushed me to find success. She asked for a goodbye hug, but I refused. No, don't ask why. You won't like the answer. Just then, Amy walked in. Hi, honey, I just need... She saw Kathy. Sorry, I'll come back. I took her hand. No need to wait. Miss Myers was just leaving. I guided Amy out of the room, leaving Kathy behind for good. As soon as we turned the corner, Amy pulled me against the wall, kissing me passionately. I know who she is, she said. I started to explain, but she put her hand on my lips. No need. I can be jealous and you're mine. No more ex-wives I don't know about? I shook my head. No. Good. I trust you, but you're too soft-hearted. It's a good thing I'm here to keep you in line. Now, don't you have something to ask me? It didn't go exactly as I'd imagined, but I got down on one knee and took out the ring from my pocket. People were passing by, secretaries and assistants heading to lunch, floor managers carrying paperwork. They all stopped and stared. As you said, I'd be lost without you. I think I need a little more supervision, and the only way to get that is by having you with me forever. Amy, love of my life. It took me 2 tries, but I believe I found the woman I was meant to be with. Please, baby, marry me. It wasn't the romantic speech I had hoped for, but I got my point across. I think everyone in the hall was holding their breath as she knelt to my level. Yes, she said. Plain, simple, and exactly the word I wanted to hear more than anything in my life. People clapped and cheered, but neither of us noticed. We stayed on the floor, kissing for nearly 5 minutes, long enough for the kids to come running down the hall. Maria and Debbie pulled Amy up, and the 3 of them hugged, dancing in a circle. The boys just stood there, grinning. Stop smirking and help an old man up, I told them. They pulled me to my feet, and the girls grabbed me while Amy hugged Jerry and Greg. Within 40 minutes, the news had spread across both plants. An hour later, Mavis called. Remember, I sit on your side of the church, she reminded me. I wished I could have seen her face. You won't be sitting much. Since my parents have passed, you'll be the mother of the groom. She couldn't speak, so she hung up. The date was set, and Amy had moved into my house full-time. We had a long talk about the future. I think I'm going to retire. The boys are doing well, and Ralph will still be around to guide them. I'll stay on as CEO, but only step in if they hit a deadlock or need advice. If you retire, I retire, she said. All right. Please, honey, she teased. Like I'm going to let you wander around alone. My new full-time job will be keeping an eye on you. Everyone was thrilled about the engagement, except Gail. She hadn't been happy about much lately. She finally put an end to her husband's reckless spending and told him to get a job if he wanted extra money. He had quit working the day after they got married. He exploded in anger, withdrew as much as he could from their accounts, and left. Then he sued for divorce, asking for alimony and half of her share of the company. Barry did his job. He brought up the partnership and corporation papers that clearly excluded the business from being community property. It was a gray area, but Barry made it clear he could drag things out for years, and her husband would be paying his own fees unless a lawyer took the case on contingency. Barry had a solid reputation, and most lawyers were hesitant. In the end, Gail had to pay him $1.5 million to make him go away. Gail came out to our house for lunch with Amy and me. She looked exhausted and frustrated. I want out of the company, she said bluntly. I want to take the jean business and the brand. You can have the rest. Can we work something out? That night, Amy and I discussed it. She said it wasn't her decision, but I reminded her that we were going to be life partners, and every choice from now on would affect both of us. We consulted Barry, who brought in an independent firm to appraise the business. In the end, we split it the way Gail proposed. She took the jean company and kept the Lardic brand. I had to pay her $2 million in cash to buy out her remaining equity. Amy tried to convince Gail to stay, but Gail was determined. I've learned a lot. It's time for me to move on and follow my own vision. After the paperwork was signed, Gail closed the factory and moved her business to China, leaving the locals devastated. I was furious, but there was nothing I could do. What I could do, however, was buy the equipment and restart under a new brand. Amy came up with our new logo, Livin' Large, featuring 2 big red L's on the pocket. We updated our website, sent out memos, and posted on YouTube to explain the change, without bad-mouthing Gail, though people figured it out. Gail thrived for 3 years before selling her company to a Chinese syndicate and opening a design house in LA. Meanwhile, innovation thrived in our company, and Maria came up with a new idea, working with Mavis on the Punk Raccoon line. Instead of the familiar cute logo, the raccoon had black bat-like wings and red eyes with skeletal outlines. We launched hoodies and tees using kids from the community to spread the word. Amy and I eventually married, and I met her son, who had just graduated from college. We brought him into the business, with Greg and Jerry helping him along. Rosalind remarried and moved away, which, while unspoken, brought relief to the boys. Sunday dinners have become big family gatherings. Amy and I are mostly retired, attending only a monthly board meeting. Our honeymoon was a world cruise, and we loved it so much that it's now an annual tradition, taking the grandkids along to give the parents a break. Life has been good. As for Mavis, she retired for 6 months, then called me one day. "Do you know who Ozzy Osbourne is?" she asked. "Yes, Mavis." Good, because I'm quoting him. Retirement sucks. "When can I come back?" I laughed and told her, "As soon as you can walk through the door." She's still going strong.
Subscribe to Cheating Tales Lab for more original and exclusive stories. Now let's begin this one. Ezra Blackwood's head felt like it was splitting in two. The harsh fluorescent light stabbed at his eyes as he struggled to focus on his surroundings. White walls, the antiseptic smell, a rhythmic beeping. Hospital. But why? He tried to piece together his fragmented memories. There had been a business trip, a last-minute flight to Chicago. The Hyatt Regency. He'd gotten back early, wanting to surprise Vivian. The sharp click of heels on linoleum snapped him back to the present. Vivian, his wife of 10 years, stood in the doorway, perfectly put together as always in her Chanel suit. Her manicured nails fidgeted with the strap of her Hermes bag. "I'm sorry you caught me with my lover in that hotel room," she said, her voice lacking any real remorse. "He didn't mean to knock you out cold, I swear. Please don't press charges." Ezra stared at her, rage building inside him like magma in a volcano. 10 years of marriage, a decade of shared dreams, struggles, triumphs. All of it a lie. "I'll destroy you both without the law," he replied, his voice hoarse but filled with icy determination. Vivian's concerned facade crumbled, replaced by a smirk that made Ezra's blood boil. She chuckled, the sound grating on his nerves. "Oh, honey, you'll be paying me alimony for the rest of your miserable life." As she turned to leave, something caught Ezra's eye. An emerald pendant hung around her neck, glinting in the harsh hospital lighting. He didn't recognize it. It certainly wasn't a family heirloom he would have known. A gift from her lover, no doubt. Another betrayal to add to the growing list. Before he could demand answers, a nurse bustled into the room. "Mr. Blackwood, you have another visitor. Your sister, Lydia?" Ezra's brow furrowed. He hadn't spoken to Lydia in years. What the hell was she doing here? The nurse ushered in a woman who bore little resemblance to the carefree girl Ezra remembered. Lydia Blackwood, now 35, carried herself with the wary confidence of someone who had seen too much of the world's darkness. Her sharp eyes took in every detail of the room before settling on her brother. "Hello, Ezra," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "It's been a while." Ezra nodded, unsure how to respond. The last time they'd spoken had been at their father's funeral 10 years ago. James Blackwood's death in a car accident had shattered their family. Ezra had thrown himself into his legal career, determined to make his father proud. Lydia had chosen a different path. "I heard about what happened," Lydia continued, perching on the edge of a plastic chair. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," Ezra growled. "What are you doing here, Lydia? Last I heard, you were chasing conspiracy theories halfway around the world." Lydia's eyes flashed with irritation. "I'm an investigative journalist, Ezra, and those conspiracy theories have uncovered some very real, very dangerous truths." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. I've been investigating a series of corporate cover-ups. I think they're connected to Dad's death. Ezra scoffed. Dad died in a car accident, Lydia. It was tragic, but it wasn't some grand conspiracy. Was it? Lydia challenged. Have you ever looked into the circumstances? The brake failure, the convenient lack of witnesses. Ezra opened his mouth to argue, but Lydia pressed on. I've uncovered links to a company called Nexichem. They're at the center of this whole mess. Nexichem. The name sent a chill down Ezra's spine. It was one of his firm's biggest clients. He personally handled several of their environmental compliance cases. What do you know about Nexichem? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Lydia's eyes narrowed. More than I can safely share right now. But I think they're involved in something big, Ezra. Something deadly. Before Ezra could respond, he heard hushed voices outside his room. He recognized Vivian's voice, along with a man's he didn't know. The words Nexichem and silencing drifted through the partially open door. Lydia tensed, clearly having heard the same thing. We can't talk here, she whispered. It's not safe. As if on cue, a man appeared in the doorway. Felix Reeves, Ezra's longtime friend and a private investigator, surveyed the room with a practiced eye. Ready to blow this popsicle stand? Felix asked, his casual tone belying the concern in his eyes. I've got a car waiting. Ezra nodded, suddenly eager to be anywhere but here. As Felix helped him out of bed, Lydia gathered his belongings. We'll go to my place, she said quietly. We have a lot to discuss. Felix's car wound through the city streets, the tension in the vehicle palpable. Ezra's mind raced, trying to process everything that had happened. His perfect life had shattered in an instant, and now his estranged sister was talking about conspiracies and cover-ups. They pulled up to a nondescript apartment building. Lydia led them up 3 flights of stairs, constantly checking over her shoulder. She unlocked a heavy door and ushered them inside. The apartment was small but neat, filled with stacks of papers and multiple computer screens. A young woman with bright blue hair looked up from one of the computers, her eyes widening at the sight of the newcomers. Ezra, Felix, this is my roommate, Zara Chun, Lydia said. Zara, this is my brother Ezra and his friend Felix. Zara nodded curtly, her gaze lingering on Ezra. The corporate lawyer, she said, her tone making it clear that wasn't a compliment. Ezra bristled. Environmental law. Actually, I specialize in helping companies comply with regulations and clean up contaminated sites. Something in Zara's expression shifted. Really? That's not what I expected. Before Ezra could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and saw it was Harold Winters, his law firm partner. With a sigh, he answered, Ezra, where the hell are you? Harold's voice was tense. Vivian's already filed for divorce. She's seeking a substantial settlement. Ezra's grip on the phone tightened. What? How is that even possible? It's been less than a day. I don't know, but her lawyers are moving fast. We need to talk strategy. Can you come in? I'll be there as soon as I can, Ezra said, his mind reeling. He hung up and turned to the others. I have to go to the office. Vivian's already filed for divorce. Lydia's eyes narrowed. That was fast. Too fast. Ezra, before you go, there's something you need to see. She pulled out a file and spread its contents on the coffee table. These are the results of my investigation into Nexichem. There's a pattern of environmental violations, suspicious accidents at their facilities, and, well, look at this. Ezra leaned in, his legal mind immediately spotting the irregularities in the documents. This can't be right. These violation reports, they're identical to the ones I filed, but the data's been altered. Zara spoke up, her earlier hostility replaced by professional interest. I've been helping Lydia dig into Nexichem's digital footprint. Their security is tight, but I've managed to find some discrepancies in their financial records. As if on cue, one of Zara's computers pinged. She rushed over, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Holy shit. Ezra, I think this is for you. She turned the screen, revealing an encrypted email addressed to Ezra. With shaking hands, he entered his password. The message opened, revealing partial financial records that hinted at massive bribes paid by Nexichem to various officials and law firms, including Ezra's own. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Ezra felt like the floor was dropping out from under him. Everything he thought he knew about his marriage, his career, even his father's death was suddenly in question. Felix was the first to break the silence. "Well, folks, looks like we've got ourselves a good old-fashioned conspiracy. What's the play?" Lydia looked at Ezra, her expression a mix of determination and uncertainty. "That depends on you, big brother. Are you in?" Ezra glanced around the room. At his estranged sister who had never given up searching for the truth, at the brilliant hacker who had put aside her prejudices to help, at his loyal friend ready to dive into danger. Then he thought of Vivian's betrayal, of the altered documents, of his father's suspicious death. He took a deep breath. "I'm in. Let's take these bastards down." Zara grinned, cracking her knuckles as she turned back to her computer. "Now we're talking. Let's see what else we can dig up on Nexichem." As the team began to formulate their plan, Ezra couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into something far bigger and more dangerous than any of them realized. But for the first time in years, he felt alive. The truth was out there, and he was going to find it, no matter the cost. Ezra Blackwood straightened his tie, his face a mask of professional detachment as he strode into the offices of Winters, Blackwood, and Associates. The familiar scent of leather and expensive cologne did nothing to calm the storm raging inside him. Every face he passed, every greeting he returned, it all felt like a lie now. He nodded to his secretary, Sarah, as he passed. "Any messages?" "Mr. Winters wants to see you in his office as soon as possible," Sarah replied, her brow furrowed with concern. "Is everything all right, Mr. Blackwood? There are rumors." Ezra forced a smile. Just a bit under the weather. Nothing to worry about. As soon as his office door closed behind him, Ezra's facade crumbled. He sank into his chair, his mind racing. How deep did this conspiracy go? How many of his colleagues were involved? He booted up his computer, heart pounding as he began to dig through the firm's files on Nexichem. What he found made his blood run cold. Report after report of environmental violations, all neatly covered up with falsified data and legal sleight of hand. And there, buried in a subfolder, was a document detailing a toxic waste spill in a low-income neighborhood. The cancer rates in the area had skyrocketed, but Nexichem had managed to dodge all responsibility. Ezra felt sick. He had built his career on protecting the environment, on holding corporations accountable. And all this time, he had been part of the problem. A commotion outside his office pulled him from his thoughts. He recognized that voice, Vivian. "I don't care if he's busy. He's my husband, and I need to speak with him now." Ezra steeled himself as the door burst open. Vivian stormed in, her eyes blazing with a fury he had never seen before. "You think you can just disappear and ignore my calls?" she hissed. "My lawyers are going to bury you, Ezra. Unless what?" Ezra asked, his voice deceptively calm. Vivian's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Unless you agree to my terms. No questions asked, no fights. You give me what I want, or I'll make sure everyone knows about your dirty little secrets." Ezra's mind raced. What secrets? He had always been faithful, always played by the rules. Then he saw it, the watch on Vivian's wrist. It was too large for her, clearly a man's watch, and he recognized it. It belonged to Harold Winters. Before he could process this new betrayal, his phone buzzed. A message from Harold. "My office. Now." Ezra stood, straightening his suit. "We're not done here, Vivian." Her laughter followed him out the door. "Oh, we're just getting started, darling." Harold's office was a shrine to old money and power. The man himself sat behind a massive mahogany desk, his fingers steepled as he watched Ezra enter. "Sit down, Ezra," Harold said, his tone deceptively friendly. "We need to talk about Nexichem." Ezra's heart skipped a beat. He fought to keep his expression neutral as he took a seat. What about them? Harold's eyes narrowed. I've heard rumors that you've been investigating our biggest client. I'm sure I don't need to remind you about client confidentiality. The threat was clear. Ezra felt a chill run down his spine. Of course not, he replied smoothly. I'm just doing my due diligence, making sure all our I's are dotted and T's are crossed. Harold nodded, but his eyes remained cold. See that you do. Nexichem is very important to this firm. It would be a shame if anything were to jeopardize that relationship. As Ezra left Harold's office, his phone buzzed again. A message from Felix. Got something you need to see. Meet me at the usual spot. An hour later, Ezra sat in a dimly lit bar, watching surveillance footage on Felix's laptop. His stomach churned as he saw Harold Vivian and a man he recognized as Marcus Thorne, Nexichem CEO, meeting at a secluded marina. When was this taken? Ezra asked, his voice hoarse. Felix's expression was grim. 2 days ago. Ezra, I think your wife's affair, it wasn't just about sex. I think it was orchestrated to keep you in check. Ezra nodded, the pieces falling into place. His own firm, his own wife. They were all part of Nexichem's web of deceit, and he had been the fool at the center of it all. We need to bring them down, Ezra said, his voice filled with cold determination. All of them. Felix nodded, his eyes glinting with the thrill of the hunt. Where do we start? Zara's fingers flew across the keyboard, her face illuminated by the glow of multiple screens. Lydia paced behind her, while Ezra sat perfectly still, his lawyer's mind cataloging every detail. Got it, Zara announced, her voice tight with excitement. I've decrypted the anonymous email. You're not going to believe this. The screens filled with financial records, showing a complex web of transactions between Nexichem, Winters, Blackwood and Associates, and a dozen shell companies. It's a massive money laundering operation, Lydia breathed, her journalist instincts on fire. They're hiding millions in bribes and payoffs. Ezra's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Need to talk. It's about Nexichem. Meet me in the parking garage. Level B2. Mia. He recognized the name. Mia Rodriguez, a paralegal at the firm. Young, ambitious, and sharp as a tack. What did she know? I have to go, Ezra said, standing abruptly. Keep digging. We need everything you can find. The parking garage was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of oil and exhaust. Ezra's footsteps echoed as he made his way to level B2. A figure emerged from the shadows, Mia, her eyes wide with fear. Mr. Blackwood, she whispered, glancing around nervously. I found something about Nexichem. I think they're dumping toxic waste illegally. Ezra's heart raced. Tell me everything. Mia's words tumbled out in a rush. She had been organizing files when she stumbled across documents detailing Nexichem's illegal activities. For months, she had been quietly gathering evidence, terrified of what might happen if she came forward. I want to do the right thing, Mia said, her voice shaking. But I'm scared. These people, they're powerful. They're dangerous. Ezra placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You're doing the right thing, Mia. We'll protect you. I promise. As they formulated a plan for Mia to act as a whistleblower, with Ezra as her legal representation, Lydia made another breakthrough. She uncovered old news articles suggesting that their father, James Blackwood, had been investigating Nexichem before his death. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture more horrifying than any of them had imagined. But as they prepared to go public with their evidence, a new complication arose. Vivian reached out to Ezra, her voice honey-sweet on the phone. Darling, I've made a terrible mistake. Can we meet? I want to make things right. Ezra's instinct screamed that it was a trap, but he saw an opportunity. Of course, he replied, his voice carefully neutral. Our usual place? As Vivian spun her tale of manipulation and regret, Ezra discreetly recorded every word. He didn't believe her for a second, but her confession might prove useful. Their celebration was short-lived, however. Zara discovered that their communications had been compromised. Nexachem's private security force was watching their every move. The net was closing in, but Ezra and his team were ready for a fight. The abandoned Nexachem research facility loomed before them, a hulking shadow against the night sky. Ezra's heart pounded as he and Felix approached, their footsteps muffled by the overgrown grass. Mia had vanished without a trace, just as they were preparing to go public with their evidence. Felix had traced her last known location to this facility, and now they were walking into what felt very much like a trap. "I don't like this," Felix muttered, his hand hovering near the gun concealed under his jacket. "It's too quiet." Ezra nodded. "We don't have a choice. Mia risked everything to help us. We can't abandon her now." They found a rusted side door, the lock easily picked by Felix's skilled hands. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the acrid smell of chemicals. Their flashlights revealed abandoned equipment, shattered glass, and ominous dark stains on the floor. As they delved deeper into the facility, they stumbled upon a room that made Ezra's blood run cold. It was a makeshift laboratory, filled with bubbling vats of noxious liquid and cages that had clearly once held test subjects. The implications were horrifying. "My God!" Felix whispered, snapping photos with his phone. "This is way bigger than we thought. They're not just dumping toxic waste. They're creating it." A noise from the hallway made them both freeze. Footsteps getting closer. They ducked behind a large piece of equipment, hearts racing as a group of men entered the room. At their head was Marcus Thorne, Nexachem CEO, his expensive suit incongruous in the decrepit lab. "Find them," Marcus snarled to his security team. "They can't be allowed to leave here alive." Ezra and Felix exchanged a look of panic. They were trapped, outgunned, and running out of options. But before they could move, another figure entered the room, Lydia. Ezra's heart stopped. What was his sister doing here? But as he watched, his confusion turned to horror. Lydia walked up to Marcus, her posture relaxed, familiar. "The basement is clear," she reported. "No sign of them." Marcus nodded. "Good work, Agent Blackwood. Your cover has been invaluable to us." Ezra felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Lydia, working for Nexachem? It couldn't be true. But as he watched his sister interact with the man responsible for so much suffering, doubt crept in. Had everything been a lie? The standoff that followed was tense, with Lydia clearly torn between her loyalty to her brother and her commitment to whatever mission she was on. Ezra's mind raced, trying to make sense of this betrayal. But there was no time for explanations. As Marcus's men closed in, violence erupted. In the chaos, Felix was hit, crying out in pain as a bullet tore through his shoulder. Ezra managed to fight his way to a locked door, behind which they found Mia, terrified but alive. As they fled the facility, alarms blaring and gunshots echoing behind them, Lydia appeared one last time. She pressed a USB drive into Ezra's hand, her eyes pleading. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'll explain everything, I promise. But you have to go. Now." Ezra hesitated, 1,000 questions on his lips. But with Felix bleeding and Mia shaking with fear, he knew they had no choice. They ran into the night, leaving Lydia behind to maintain her cover, whatever that truly meant. As they sped away in Felix's car, Ezra clutched the USB drive, his mind reeling. The evidence they had gathered, the risks they had taken, the betrayals they had suffered. It all paled in comparison to the realization that this conspiracy went deeper than any of them had imagined. And at the center of it all was his sister, a woman he thought he knew, now a stranger playing a game he didn't understand. As the city lights blurred past, Ezra made a silent vow. He would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Nexachem, Winters, Blackwood, and Associates, even Lydia herself, they would all face justice. The web of deceit was vast, but Ezra was done being a fly caught in its strands. It was time to become the spider, The safe house was a far cry from the luxury Ezra Blackwood was accustomed to. Peeling wallpaper, the musty smell of old books, and a pervasive dampness that seemed to seep into his bones. But right now, it was the safest place in the world. Ezra sat at a rickety table, his laptop open before him, surrounded by stacks of documents. Across from him, Mia Rodriguez pored over financial records, her brow furrowed in concentration. In the corner, Zara's fingers flew across her keyboard, the glow of multiple screens illuminating her face in the dim room. They had been here for days, maybe weeks. Time had become a blur. Felix's activist contacts had come through, providing them with a network of safe houses to move between. But the constant fear of discovery, the paranoia that each shadow held an enemy, was taking its toll. Ezra rubbed his eyes, trying to focus on the document before him. His mind kept drifting to Lydia, his sister, the undercover agent. The betrayal still stung, even as he tried to rationalize it. Was she really on their side? Or had everything been a lie? Holy shit! Zara's voice cut through the silence. You guys need to see this. Ezra and Mia crowded around Zara's workstation. On the screen, plans for a massive construction project unfolded. They're planning to dump toxic waste in the Oakwood Nature Reserve, Zara explained, her voice tight with anger. If this goes through, it'll contaminate the groundwater for the entire region. Ezra felt his stomach churn. Oakwood was one of the last unspoiled areas in the state, home to endangered species and a vital water source for surrounding communities. We can't let this happen, Mia said, her voice shaking with determination. We have to stop them. Ezra nodded, his mind already racing with legal strategies. We need more evidence. Concrete proof that links Nexichem to the dump site. As if on cue, Ezra's burner phone buzzed. An unknown number. He hesitated for a moment before answering. Ezra, Vivian's voice uncharacteristically hesitant. We need to talk. I want to help. Ezra's grip on the phone tightened. Why should I believe you? Because I know things, Ezra. Things that could bring down Nexichem, Harold. All of them. Meet me, please. For old time's sake. Ezra's mind raced. It could be a trap, but if Vivian was telling the truth, her testimony could be the key to breaking the case wide open. I'll think about it, he said finally and hung up. Zara and Mia looked at him expectantly. Ezra sighed. That was Vivian. She says she wants to help. Mia's eyes widened. You can't seriously be considering trusting her. We don't have to trust her, Ezra replied, a plan forming in his mind. But we can use her. If she's genuine, great. If not, well, we'll be ready. As they began to formulate a plan, Ezra couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Nexichem's toxic dump could happen any day now. They needed to act fast. But first, he had a decision to make about Lydia. His sister was in deep, playing a dangerous game. Could he trust the information she was feeding them? Or was she leading them into a trap? Ezra stared at the USB drive Lydia had pressed into his hand during their escape from the Nexichem facility. He hadn't told the others about it yet. With a deep breath, he plugged it in. What he found made his blood run cold. Detailed plans of Nexichem's operations, financial records, emails implicating high-level government officials. And at the center of it all, a name that made Ezra's heart stop, James Blackwood. Their father hadn't just been investigating Nexichem before his death. He had uncovered a conspiracy that went far beyond corporate greed. This was about power, about control over the most basic human need, water. Ezra leaned back, his mind reeling. They weren't just fighting a corporation anymore. They were up against a system, a web of corruption that stretched from the boardroom to the highest levels of government. He looked at Mia and Zara, both still poring over documents, unaware of the bombshell Ezra had just uncovered. They had all risked everything to get this far. Now, it was time to take the biggest risk of all. Pack up, Ezra said, his voice filled with determination. We're going to meet Vivian, and then we're going to bring the whole dam system down. The Nexachem boardroom was a study in corporate opulence. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while the polished mahogany table reflected the concerned faces of the board members gathered around it. Marcus Thorne, CEO of Nexachem, stood at the head of the table, his usual confidence noticeably shaken. "Ladies and gentlemen, I assure you that these allegations are completely unfounded. Nexachem has always operated within the bounds of the law." From her seat at the table, Lydia Blackwood fought to keep her expression neutral. Years of undercover work had honed her poker face, but even she was finding it difficult to maintain her composure. Everything was coming to a head, and she prayed that Ezra's plan would work. As if on cue, the doors burst open. Ezra strode in, Mia at his side, followed by a team of federal agents. The room erupted in chaos. "Marcus Thorne," Ezra's voice cut through the commotion, "you and your co-conspirators are under arrest for environmental crimes, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder." Marcus's face contorted with rage. "This is absurd. You have no authority." "Oh, but we do," Mia interrupted, her voice steady despite her nervousness. She nodded to Zara, who had slipped in unnoticed during the confusion. Suddenly, every screen in the room came to life. Financial records, emails, surveillance footage, all the evidence they had painstakingly gathered over the past weeks played out for all to see. "At this very moment," Ezra continued, "this evidence is being broadcast to every Nexachem employee, shareholder, and regulatory agency. The game is over, Marcus." Lydia stood, finally dropping her cover. "And that's not all. We have proof that Nexachem was responsible for the death of James Blackwood, a man who threatened to expose your plan to monopolize water resources through deliberate contamination." The color drained from Marcus's face. He lunged for his laptop, likely containing even more incriminating evidence. But Ezra was faster. What followed was a desperate chase through the Nexachem headquarters. Ezra pursued Marcus through winding corridors and up staircases, their footsteps echoing in the suddenly empty building. They burst onto the roof. The city spread out before them. Marcus stood at the edge, the hard drive clutched in his hand, the wind whipping his usually immaculate suit. "It's over, Marcus," Ezra called out, cautiously approaching. "There's nowhere left to run." Marcus turned, a wild look in his eyes. "You don't understand, Blackwood. This goes beyond Nexachem, beyond me. We were creating a better world. By poisoning people? By killing my father." Ezra's voice cracked with emotion. "How is that a better world?" "Resources are running out," Marcus snarled. "Water is the new oil. Whoever controls it, controls everything. Your father was too idealistic to see that. Just like you." Ezra took another step forward. "It doesn't have to be this way, Marcus. Turn yourself in. Tell the truth. Maybe then we can actually build a better world." For a moment, it seemed like Marcus might consider it. Then, with a bitter laugh, he hurled the hard drive off the roof. Ezra lunged for it, but it was too late. The small device disappeared into the city below, taking with it the names of countless corrupt officials. As the authorities led Marcus away, Ezra stood at the edge of the roof, looking out over the city. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The congressional hearing room was packed. Journalists, activists, and curious citizens filled every available seat, while cameras broadcast the proceedings to millions around the world. Ezra adjusted his tie, acutely aware of the weight of the moment. Beside him, Lydia gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. Despite the years of separation and recent revelations, they were in this together now. "Mr. Blackwood," the committee chairman began, "please tell us in your own words what you uncovered about Nexachem and its collaborators." For the next several hours, Ezra and Lydia laid out the entire conspiracy, the environmental violations, the cover-ups, the bribes, and finally, the truth about their father's death. As they spoke, screens around the room displayed evidence, much of it provided by Harold Winters in exchange for a plea deal. In another part of the city, Vivian Blackwood was led away from her private jet in handcuffs, her attempt to flee the country thwarted by an anonymous tip. Back in the hearing room, Ezra concluded his testimony. Nexicam's crimes are not isolated incidents. They are symptoms of a deeper sickness in our society, where profit is prioritized over people, and the environment is seen as a resource to be exploited rather than protected. It's time for a change. The aftermath of the hearing was a whirlwind. Indictments were handed down, regulations were tightened, and a national conversation about corporate responsibility and environmental protection took center stage. Months passed. Ezra found himself standing before a group of eager law students, their faces a mix of idealism and uncertainty that reminded him of himself. Not so long ago. The law is a powerful tool, he told them, but it's only as good as the people wielding it. You have the power to shape the future, to fight for justice, to protect those who can't protect themselves. Use it wisely. As the students filed out, Ezra's phone buzzed with a message from Lydia. Her book, Exposing Corporate Environmental Crimes, was hitting shelves next week, another step in their ongoing fight. Later that evening, Ezra met with Felix and Zara at their new office. The sign on the door read Clearwater Tech, Innovative Solutions for a Cleaner Future. Felix, his arm still in a sling but his spirit unbroken, grinned as Ezra entered. Welcome to the revolution, counselor. Zara looked up from her computer, her eyes bright with excitement. We just finalized the plans for our first water purification plant. Want to see? As Ezra looked over the plans, he felt a sense of hope he hadn't experienced in years. They had a long way to go, but they were on the right path. His phone buzzed again. A message from Mia, now in her second year of law school, top of her class. She was interning at an environmental law firm over the summer and wanted Ezra's advice on a case. Ezra smiled as he typed his reply. The fight for justice was far from over, but they weren't in it alone anymore. A new generation was rising, armed with knowledge, passion, and the determination to make a difference. As he left the office that night, Ezra paused to look up at the stars, barely visible through the city's light pollution. Somewhere up there, he liked to think his father was watching, proud of what they had accomplished and what they continued to fight for. The web of deceit had been torn down, but the work of rebuilding, of creating a more just and sustainable world, was just beginning. And Ezra Blackwood was ready for the challenge. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you. Subscribe to Cheating Tales Lab for more original and exclusive stories. We hope you enjoy this one. Let's begin. Gabriel Winters pulled into the driveway, his headlights cutting through the evening darkness. The client meeting had run late, and a dull throb pulsed behind his eyes. As he approached the front door, he noticed the dim glow from the living room window. Odd. Olivia usually had all the lights blazing when she was home alone. He entered quietly, not wanting to startle his pregnant wife if she was napping. But as he rounded the corner into the living room, he saw her sitting rigidly on the couch, staring blankly ahead. Liv, everything okay? She turned to him, her face a mask of anguish. Gabriel, we need to talk. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He sat down heavily in the armchair across from her, dread pooling in his stomach. What's wrong? Olivia took a shuddering breath. Honey, this baby is a result of a revenge affair. Gabriel blinked, sure he had misheard. What are you talking about? I thought you had cheated on me, so I slept with someone else. Her voice was barely above a whisper. He stared at her, uncomprehending. The words didn't make sense. Olivia is Olivia. Having an affair? It was impossible. And yet, you're 6 months pregnant, he said slowly. Are you saying? She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. The baby isn't yours. I'm so sorry, Gabriel. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Gabriel gripped the arms of the chair, his knuckles turning white. Who? He demanded. Who did you sleep with? Olivia shook her head. I can't tell you that. You can't tell me? His voice rose. You dropped this bombshell on me, and now you're keeping secrets. Please, try to understand. Understand what? Gabriel surged to his feet. That my wife cheated on me? That she's carrying another man's child? What exactly am I supposed to understand here, Olivia? She flinched at his tone. I know I've hurt you terribly, but please, let me explain. Explain? There's nothing to explain. He was shouting now, unable to contain the maelstrom of emotions. That's your mess, not mine. All the best for raising a baby alone. He turned on his heel, striding towards the door. He had to get out of there before he said or did something he'd regret. Wait, Olivia called desperately. You might want to hear a secret about your brother, Marcus. Gabriel froze, his hand on the doorknob. What about Marcus? Olivia's voice trembled. He showed me photos of you with another woman. That's why I thought you had cheated. Gabriel turned back slowly, his mind reeling. Photos? What photos? They showed you with a blonde woman, hugging her, kissing her cheek. Marcus said he'd seen you together multiple times. That's impossible, Gabriel said flatly. I've never cheated on you. Olivia's eyes widened, but the photos were fake, or taken out of context. Gabriel's jaw clenched as the pieces started falling into place. Marcus manipulated you. Oh, God! Olivia buried her face in her hands. What have I done? Gabriel stood there, torn between rage at his brother and the lingering betrayal from his wife. Without another word, he wrenched open the door and stormed out into the night. The drive to Marcus's downtown apartment was a blur. Rain lashed against the windshield, matching Gabriel's turbulent mood. He barely registered the familiar streets of Ravenwood as he sped through the small coastal town. He pounded on Marcus's door, not caring about the late hour. When his brother finally opened up, looking disheveled and confused, Gabriel shoved past him into the apartment. What the hell, Gabe? Marcus stumbled back. What are you doing here? Show me the photos, Gabriel growled. Marcus blinked. What photos? Don't play dumb. The ones you showed Olivia, of me supposedly cheating. Understanding dawned on Marcus's face, quickly followed by panic. I don't know what you're talking about. Cut the crap. Gabriel advanced on his brother. You manipulated my wife into thinking I was unfaithful. Why? Marcus backed away, hands raised. Look, you've got it all wrong. I was just trying to protect you. Protect me? Gabriel laughed bitterly. By destroying my marriage. No, Marcus's back hit the wall. It's complicated, okay? I can explain everything. Then start explaining. Now. But as Marcus opened his mouth, Gabriel's patience snapped. He lunged forward, grabbing his brother by the shirt collar and slamming him against the wall. A framed painting crashed to the floor, the glass shattering. Tell me the truth. Gabriel roared. Marcus's eyes darted to the fallen painting, then back to Gabriel. Something in his expression made Gabriel pause. He glanced down, noticing for the first time the outline of a safe revealed behind the broken frame. What's in there? He demanded. Nothing, Marcus said quickly. Too quickly. Gabriel released his brother and strode to the safe. Open it. Come on, Gabe. This is ridiculous. Open the safe. Marcus hesitated, then slumped in defeat. He input the code with trembling fingers. The safe door swung open, revealing stacks of documents. Gabriel rifled through the papers, his expression darkening with each page. What the hell is this, Marcus? These look like fraudulent real estate deals. Marcus sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. It wasn't supposed to go this far, he mumbled. What wasn't? His brother looked up, defeat etched on his face. I've been involved in a real estate scheme. Your firm was unknowingly part of some of the projects. I was afraid you'd figure it out, So you tried to break up my marriage? Gabriel's voice was dangerously quiet. To distract me? Marcus nodded miserably. I'm sorry, Gabe. I never meant for things to get so out of hand. Gabriel stared at his brother, a stranger wearing a familiar face. Without another word, he gathered up the incriminating documents and walked out, leaving Marcus alone with the wreckage of his schemes. The house was dark when Gabriel returned. He called out for Olivia, but received no answer. A quick search confirmed his suspicions. She was gone. He sank onto the bed, head spinning from the night's revelations. As he shifted, something hard dug into his leg. Frowning, he reached into his pocket and pulled out Olivia's phone. He must have grabbed it by mistake in his haste to confront Marcus. Gabriel stared at the device, debating. He had never invaded Olivia's privacy before, but after everything that had happened, his thumb hovered over the power button. Then, with a deep breath, he pressed it. The screen lit up, revealing a pattern lock. Gabriel's hand shook slightly as he traced a familiar shape. Their wedding date. The phone unlocked. He hesitated again before opening her email app. If there was any information about her whereabouts, it would be there. What he found instead made his blood run cold. Months of emails between Olivia and someone named Elena Vasquez. Talk of investigations, evidence gathering, coded messages about meetings. Gabriel's eyes widened as he pieced together the truth. Olivia hadn't been having an affair. She'd been investigating Marcus and his co-conspirators all along. He scrolled frantically, looking for the most recent messages. There, a meeting scheduled for tonight, at the old Ravenwood Lighthouse. Gabriel was halfway to the door when his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He opened the message. It read, "Stop digging. For your own good." Whatever was going on, he was going to get to the bottom of it, and he was going to find Olivia. The old Ravenwood Lighthouse loomed before Gabriel, a weathered sentinel against the darkening sky. Wind whipped at his clothes as he picked his way up the rocky path, the beam of his flashlight dancing erratically over the uneven ground. The air tasted of salt and impending storm. He paused at the base of the structure, his mind racing. Olivia had been investigating Marcus all along. The affair, the pregnancy, it was all a ruse. But why? And who was this Elena Vasquez? The door creaked open at his touch, rust flaking off the hinges. Gabriel stepped inside, blinking as his eyes adjusted to the gloom. A figure stood silhouetted against the far window. "Olivia!" he called out, hope and trepidation warring in his chest. The figure turned. Not Olivia. A woman with short, dark hair and sharp eyes. "You must be Gabriel," she said. "I'm Elena Vasquez." Gabriel tensed. "Where's my wife?" Elena held up her hands. "Olivia's safe. She couldn't make it tonight. She asked me to fill you in." "Fill me in on what exactly?" "On the truth." Elena gestured for him to sit. "I know this must all be very confusing for you." Gabriel remained standing. "You could say that. My wife is pregnant with another man's child. My brother is involved in some kind of fraud scheme. And now I find out Olivia's been working with you on... what? An investigation?" Elena nodded. "Olivia suspected something was off with your brother's business dealings months ago. She reached out to me. I'm an investigative journalist. We've been gathering evidence on a massive real estate fraud operation." "And the affair?" Gabriel's voice cracked slightly on the word. "A cover story," Elena said gently, "to explain Olivia's absences and odd behavior while she was helping me investigate. There was never any other man, Gabriel. Olivia loves you more than anything." Gabriel sank onto a nearby crate, his head spinning. "Why didn't she tell me?" "She wanted to protect you, and she was afraid you wouldn't believe her. Not without proof." Elena opened her mouth to continue, but a sudden crackling sound made them both freeze. Her eyes widened. "We need to get out of here. Now." Before Gabriel could ask why, a deafening boom shook the lighthouse. The floor beneath them lurched, and he barely managed to grab Elena's arm as they both stumbled. "What the hell was that?" he shouted over the ringing in his ears. "Someone doesn't want us talking," Elena said. She tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. "They've sealed us in." Gabriel looked around wildly. There has to be another way out. They searched frantically, acutely aware of the groaning sounds coming from the lighthouse's damaged lower levels. Dust and debris rained down from above as the structure swayed ominously. "Here," Elena called, her voice tight with urgency. "I think I found something." Gabriel rushed over. Elena was crouched by a section of floorboards that looked slightly different from the rest. Together, they pried them up, revealing a dark opening beneath. "A trapdoor," Gabriel breathed. "Where does it lead?" Elena shook her head. "No idea, but it's our only option." With one last glance at the creaking lighthouse above them, they lowered themselves into the inky blackness below. The air in the tunnel was thick with dust and the musty scent of long-forgotten secrets. Gabriel and Elena moved cautiously, their path illuminated only by the weak beam of Gabriel's phone flashlight. "Watch your step," Elena warned, her voice echoing slightly in the confined space. "No telling how stable these tunnels are." Gabriel nodded, his mind racing. "How deep do you think this network goes? Physically or metaphorically?" Elena's tone was grim. "Because I have a feeling we're about to find out on both counts." They pressed on, the tunnel gradually widening. Gabriel noticed rough-hewn offshoots branching in various directions. "It's like a maze down here," he muttered. Elena paused, consulting a small device she'd pulled from her pocket. "I think we're heading towards the center of town," she said. "These tunnels must connect key locations." As if on cue, they rounded a corner and found themselves in a larger chamber. Faint light filtered through a grate above, revealing the outlines of filing cabinets and a makeshift desk. "What is this place?" Gabriel whispered. Elena was already rifling through the papers strewn across the desk. "It's an office," she said, her excitement barely contained. "And if I'm not mistaken, we had just stumbled onto the heart of the conspiracy." Gabriel joined her, his architect's eye taking in the crude maps tacked to the walls. "These are blueprints," he realized, "but they're all wrong. The dimensions, the materials listed, none of it matches the official plans I've worked on." "Exactly," Elena nodded. "They're using your firm's reputation to push through substandard, dangerous projects. And look at this." She held up a document. Signatures from the mayor, the bank president, even the chief of police. They're all in on it. Gabriel's stomach churned. How deep does this go? Before Elena could answer, the sound of approaching voices made them both freeze. Gabriel quickly doused the light on his phone, plunging them into near darkness. "Can't believe that idiot Marcus let his brother find out," a gravelly voice was saying. "If word gets out about this operation, we're all finished." "Relax," another voice replied. Gabriel's blood ran cold as he recognized it. Richard Blackwood, the mayor of Ravenwood. "We've got it under control. The lighthouse has been taken care of, and we'll find Gabriel soon enough." The voices faded as the unseen men passed by their hiding spot. Gabriel and Elena remained motionless, hardly daring to breathe. "We need to get this evidence out," Elena whispered once the coast was clear. "It's bigger than we thought. The whole town leadership is corrupt." Gabriel nodded, his jaw set. "Let's grab what we can," and his words were cut off by the sudden buzzing of his phone. He glanced down, his heart stopping as he saw the incoming video call. Marcus. With trembling fingers, he accepted the call. His brother's face filled the screen, a cold smile twisting his features. "Hello, little brother," Marcus said. I think there's someone here who wants to talk to you." The camera panned, revealing Olivia bound to a chair, fear etched on her face. "Gabriel," she cried out. Marcus's face reappeared. "Here's the deal. You and your nosy journalist friend destroy all the evidence you found, or Olivia suffers the consequences. You have 1 hour to comply." The call cut off abruptly, leaving Gabriel staring at the blank screen in horror. Elena touched his arm gently. "Gabriel, what are we going to do?" He looked at her, conflict raging in his eyes. "I don't know," he said hoarsely. "But we're running out of time." The tunnel seemed to close in around them as Gabriel and Elena made their way towards the exit, arms laden with incriminating documents. The weight of the evidence was nothing compared to the burden of the choice that lay before them. "We can't give in to Marcus's demands," Elena said, her voice tight. "This goes beyond just your family now. The entire town is at stake." Gabriel's jaw clenched. "And what about Olivia? My wife, my child. I can't just abandon them." They emerged from a hidden entrance near the town hall, blinking in the harsh light of day. The streets were oddly quiet, as if the town itself was holding its breath. "We need to think this through," Elena said, glancing around nervously. "Maybe there's a way to save Olivia and expose the truth." Gabriel nodded, his mind racing. "The mayor's office. If we can confront Blackwood directly, maybe we can force his hand." They made their way to the imposing building, its pristine facade a mockery of the corruption festering within. The receptionist's eyes widened as they burst in, but a flash of Elena's press badge bought them just enough hesitation to slip past. Mayor Blackwood looked up in surprise as they entered his office unannounced. His genial politician's smile faltered as he took in their grim expressions and the stack of papers in Elena's arms. "Mr. Winters, Ms. Vasquez," he said, recovering quickly. "To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" "Cut the act, Blackwood," Gabriel growled. "We know everything. The fraud, the cover-ups, all of it." The mayor's eyes hardened. "I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about." Elena stepped forward, spreading the damning documents across his desk. "Your signature is on every one of these, Mr. Mayor. Care to explain how your name ended up on plans for structurally unsound buildings, or these memos discussing bribes to city officials?" Blackwood's facade cracked. He glanced at the door, then back at them. "You have no idea what you're getting into," he said, his voice low. "This goes beyond just our little town. There are powerful people involved. People who won't hesitate to." "To what?" Gabriel interrupted. "Threaten innocent lives? Destroy families? It's a bit late for that." The mayor's expression shifted, a calculating look entering his eyes. "Perhaps we can come to an arrangement," he said smoothly. "I'm sure we can find a mutually beneficial solution, one that ensures everyone's safety and financial security." Elena's lip curled in disgust. "Are you trying to bribe us?" "I prefer to think of it as a business proposition," Blackwood replied. "One that could make all of your problems disappear." Gabriel stepped forward, looming over the desk. "The only thing that's going to disappear is you, straight into a prison cell." The mayor's hand inched towards a button beneath his desk, but Elena was faster. She pulled out her phone, a triumphant smile on her face. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," she said. "This entire conversation has been streaming live to my news network." "It's over, Blackwood." The color drained from the mayor's face. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of an ornate clock on the wall. Then chaos erupted. The door burst open, revealing a pair of burly police officers. "Mayor Blackwood," one of them said gruffly. "Is everything all right in here?" Gabriel's heart sank as he realized these weren't the cavalry. They were Blackwood's muscle. "Arrest them," the mayor snapped, all pretense of civility gone. "Conspiracy, trespassing, attempted extortion. Take your pick." The officers advanced, but Gabriel and Elena were already moving. They ducked under grasping arms, Elena clutching the evidence to her chest as they bolted for the door. The hallway became a blur as they ran, shouts and pounding footsteps close behind. Gabriel's lungs burned, but the thought of Olivia, still in danger, spurred him on. They burst out of the building, immediately splitting up as planned. Gabriel veered left, drawing their pursuers away from Elena and the precious documents. He ducked down alleys and vaulted fences, his architect's knowledge of the town's layout giving him a slight edge. But as he rounded a corner, a sharp pain lanced through his side. He stumbled, realizing with horror that one of the officers had managed to clip him with a wild shot. Gasping, he pressed himself against a wall, trying to staunch the bleeding. His phone buzzed, another message from Marcus. With trembling fingers, he opened it. Coordinates, followed by 5 chilling words. Last chance. Come alone. Hurry. Gabriel closed his eyes, the weight of everything crashing down upon him. Olivia needed him. The town needed him. And he was quickly running out of time to save either. With a grimace of pain, he pushed himself off the wall and began to run once more, praying he was making the right choice. Gabriel's car skidded to a stop in front of the abandoned warehouse, gravel crunching beneath the tires. The pain in his side throbbed with each labored breath, a constant reminder of how close he'd come to failure. But he couldn't think about that now. Olivia needed him. The rusted metal door groaned as he pushed it open, revealing a cavernous interior shrouded in shadows. Dust motes danced in the feeble shafts of light filtering through grimy windows. Gabriel's eyes darted around, searching for any sign of movement. "Olivia!" he called out, his voice echoing in the empty space. A muffled sound from the far corner drew his attention. There, illuminated by a single naked bulb, sat Olivia. She was bound to a chair, her eyes wide with fear and relief as she saw him. Gabriel rushed forward, his heart pounding. "It's okay, I'm here," he said, fumbling with the ropes binding her wrists. "I'm going to get you out of here." "Gabriel, behind you!" Olivia cried out. He spun around, coming face to face with the barrel of a gun. Marcus stepped out of the shadows, a cold smile twisting his features. "Hello, little brother," Marcus said, his voice dripping with disdain. "So nice of you to join us." Gabriel raised his hand slowly, mind racing. "Marcus, put the gun down. It's over. Elena's already exposed everything to the media." Marcus's laugh was harsh and bitter. "You think I care about that? This was never just about the money, Gabriel. This is about you. It's always been about you." "What are you talking about?" Marcus's eyes flashed with a lifetime of resentment. Perfect Gabriel, Mom and Dad's golden child, the successful architect with a picture-perfect life. Do you have any idea what it's like living in your shadow? Gabriel shook his head, bewildered. "Marcus, I never—" "Shut up," Marcus roared, the gun shaking in his grip. "You don't get to play innocent. Not anymore. You took everything from me, and now I'm going to take everything from you." He swung the gun towards Olivia, his finger tightening on the trigger. Time seemed to slow down. Gabriel saw the fear in Olivia's eyes, saw the madness in his brother's, and knew he had only seconds to act. He lunged forward, tackling Marcus just as the gun went off. The shot went wide, the bullet embedding itself in a nearby support beam. They grappled on the dusty floor, each fighting for control of the weapon. In the chaos, neither noticed Olivia. She had been working at her bonds throughout the confrontation, and with a final, desperate effort, she managed to free herself. She stumbled to her feet, searching frantically for something to use as a weapon. Gabriel and Marcus rolled across the floor, trading blows. Despite his injury, Gabriel fought with the strength of desperation. He couldn't let Marcus win. Not now. Not after everything. Suddenly, Marcus's grip on the gun slipped. The weapon skittered across the concrete floor, coming to rest at Olivia's feet. She snatched it up, hands trembling as she aimed it at the struggling brothers. "Stop," she shouted. "Both of you, stop right now." They froze, looking up at her. For a moment, the only sound in the warehouse was their ragged breathing. Then, from outside, came the distant wail of police sirens. Marcus's face contorted with rage. He shoved Gabriel aside and made a desperate dash for the exit. But Gabriel, running on pure adrenaline, managed to tackle him once more. They crashed into a stack of old crates, sending debris flying. As the sirens grew louder, Gabriel pinned his brother to the ground. "It's over, Marcus," he panted. "Just give up." Marcus went limp, the fight draining out of him. As Gabriel cautiously released him, he saw not the monster of the past few days, but the broken shell of the brother he once knew. The warehouse doors burst open, flooding the space with harsh light. Elena rushed in, followed by a team of state police officers. Gabriel, Olivia, Elena called out. Are you all right? As the officers swarmed in, securing Marcus and checking on Olivia, Gabriel felt the adrenaline begin to fade. The pain in his side returned full force, and he sank to his knees, exhausted. It was over. They were safe. But as he looked at Olivia's tear-streaked face and his brother being led away in handcuffs, Gabriel knew that the Real reckoning was only just beginning. The state police headquarters buzzed with activity. Gabriel sat on an uncomfortable plastic chair, a bandage wrapped around his torso where the bullet had grazed him. Across the room, Olivia was giving her statement to a detective, her voice too low for him to hear. Elena paced nearby, firing off rapid text messages to her editor. This is going to blow the lid off everything, she muttered. The mayor, the police chief, half the city council. Ravenwood will never be the same. Gabriel nodded absently, his mind still reeling from the events of the past few days. It felt like a lifetime ago that he had come home to find Olivia in their dimly lit living room, confessing to an affair that never happened. A door opened and a grim-faced officer approached. Mr. Winters, we're ready for your statement now. For the next 2 hours, Gabriel recounted everything. The fake affair, Marcus's manipulation, the hidden documents, the underground tunnels. With each revelation, the officer's eyebrows climbed higher. And you're certain about Mayor Blackwood's involvement? The officer asked. Gabriel nodded. Elena has a recording of our confrontation in his office, and there are documents linking him to the fraudulent construction projects. The officer made a note, then hesitated. There's one more thing, Mr. Winters. Your brother is requesting to speak with you. Gabriel's stomach clenched. I don't think that's a good idea. I understand, but he's been cooperating, providing names and details. His testimony could be crucial in bringing down the entire network. With a heavy sigh, Gabriel agreed. He was led to an interrogation room where Marcus sat, looking small and defeated in his orange jumpsuit. Gabriel, Marcus said, his voice hoarse. I'm sorry. For everything. Gabriel said nothing, waiting. Marcus continued, unable to meet his eyes. I know it doesn't change anything, but I want you to know I never meant for it to go this far. I was angry and jealous, and then I got in too deep with the wrong people. But I never wanted to hurt Olivia. Or you. But you did, Gabriel said quietly. You hurt us both. Marcus nodded, a tear sliding down his cheek. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends, starting with telling the police everything I know. As Gabriel left the room, he felt a strange mix of emotions, relief that the truth was finally coming out, anger at his brother's betrayal, and a deep, aching sadness for the relationship that would never be the same. He found Olivia waiting for him in the hallway. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. Can we talk? She asked softly. Somewhere private? They found an empty conference room. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Finally, Olivia broke the silence. There's something I need to tell you, Gabriel. Something I should have told you months ago. Gabriel braced himself, unsure of what new revelation could possibly be left. Olivia took a deep breath. The baby, it's not the result of an affair. I used a sperm donor. Gabriel blinked, uncomprehending. What? But why would you? Because you can't have children, Olivia said gently. I found out when I was looking into fertility treatments. The doctors ran some tests and you're infertile, Gabriel. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Gabriel gripped the edge of the table, his mind reeling. That's impossible. Why didn't you tell me? Olivia's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know how. You were so excited about starting a family, and I panicked. I thought if I could just get pregnant, everything would work out somehow. The fake affair was a way to explain it when I couldn't figure out how to tell you the truth. Gabriel sat heavily in a chair, overwhelmed. So everything, the affair, the investigation, all of it was because I was a coward, Olivia finished. I was trying to protect you, but I just made everything worse. I'm so sorry, Gabriel. He looked at her, this woman he had loved for so long, now almost a stranger. I need some time, he said finally, to process all of this. Olivia nodded, wiping away a tear. I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready to talk. As Gabriel left the police station, stepping out into the cool night air, he felt as if he was seeing the world through new eyes. Everything he thought he knew had been turned upside down. His marriage, his family, his future. Nothing was certain anymore. He walked aimlessly through the streets of Ravenwood, a town he no longer recognized. As the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, Gabriel realized that this was more than just the end of a nightmare. It was the beginning of something entirely new, and he had no idea where it would lead. 6 months later, Gabriel sat in his new apartment, staring out the window at the bustling street below. The room was sparsely furnished. He hadn't had the heart to decorate much. It still didn't feel like home. On the television, a news anchor droned on about the latest developments in what the media had dubbed the Ravenwood scandal. With the conviction of former Mayor Richard Blackwood and several prominent businessmen, the town of Ravenwood is finally starting to rebuild. New leadership has promised transparency and accountability. Gabriel tuned it out. He lived through enough of the scandal. He didn't need the constant reminders. A knock at the door roused him from his thoughts. He opened it to find Elena standing there, a wide smile on her face. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said, holding up a bottle of champagne. But I thought we might have cause for celebration. Gabriel managed a small smile. Come on in. What's the occasion? Elena set the bottle on the kitchen counter and pulled out a small envelope. I won the Pulitzer, she said, a hint of disbelief in her voice, for the Ravenwood investigation. Elena, that's incredible, Gabriel said, genuinely happy for her. Congratulations. As Elena poured the champagne, Gabriel's phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. On my way up. Hope that's still okay. He took a deep breath, steeling himself. Olivia's coming, he told Elena. She should be here any minute. Elena nodded, understanding in her eyes. Do you want me to go? Gabriel shook his head. No, stay. Please. A few minutes later, another knock came. Gabriel opened the door to find Olivia standing there, her belly now swollen with the final stages of pregnancy. Hi, she said softly. Thanks for seeing me. Gabriel stepped aside to let her in. For a moment, the three of them stood awkwardly in the small living room. I should go, Elena said, sensing the tension. Gabriel, Olivia, congratulations again. On everything. After she left, Gabriel and Olivia sat on opposite ends of the couch. The silence stretched between them, filled with months of unspoken words. Finally, Gabriel spoke. How are you feeling? Olivia rubbed her belly absently. Huge, uncomfortable, excited, terrified, all of the above. Gabriel nodded. Yeah, I know the feeling. Olivia looked at him, hope and fear warring in her eyes. Gabriel, I know we've been good at counseling, and I know you said you needed time. I need to know where we stand. Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. I'm still processing everything, he said finally. The lies, the deception, it hurt, Olivia. More than I can say. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. But, Gabriel continued, these past few months have forced me to confront a lot of things. My own fears about fatherhood, my insecurities, the way I've always tried to be perfect, to live up to everyone's expectations. He took a deep breath. I can't say I'm over it all, but I do know that I want to be a part of this child's life. Our child's life, if you'll let me. Olivia's tears spilled over. Of course, she whispered. That's all I've ever wanted. Gabriel reached out, hesitantly taking her hand. I can't promise it will be easy. We have a lot of trust to rebuild, but I think we have a chance at something new. Something honest. Olivia squeezed his hand. I know I hurt you, Gabriel, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for that. But I promise you, from this moment on, nothing but the truth between us. As they sat there, hands clasped, the future stretching out before them uncertain but full of possibility, Gabriel felt something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. The road ahead would be difficult. There were still wounds to heal, trust to rebuild. But as he looked at Olivia, at the life they had created together despite everything, Gabriel knew that they had been given a rare second chance. And this time, they would build their life on a foundation of honesty, forgiveness, and love. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
Step into the world of Nurse Emily, where routine night shifts at St. Catherine's Hospital unveil an extraordinary journey of compassion and discovery. Assigned to Mrs. Elizabeth Anderson, a patient trapped in a vegetative state, Emily's meticulous care reveals subtle signs of responsiveness that defy medical expectations. Through music and attentive observation, Emily bridges the gap between patient and caregiver, delving into ethical dilemmas and the profound mysteries of consciousness. Join us as we witness Emily's transformative journey, navigating the complexities of patient care and forging unexpected connections that redefine the boundaries of medical science and human empathy. Hello, my friends. I hope all you are fine. This is Narrative Stories channel. Let's start this story. In the heart of St. Catherine's Hospital, where the corridors echoed with the soft hum of life support machines and the occasional shuffle of tired feet, Nurse Emily navigated through the late-night stillness. Her steps were measured, her gaze focused, embodying the dedication that marked her years of service in critical care. St. Catherine's was renowned for its specialized units, where patients in the most fragile states of health received round-the-clock attention. Emily's shift began as it always did, with the exchange of briefings among nurses and the passing on of responsibilities from the previous team. Tonight, she found herself assigned to Mrs. Elizabeth Anderson, a patient whose presence in the critical care unit had become a fixture over the years. Mrs. Anderson's room was a testament to the life she had led before tragedy struck. Adorned with photographs capturing moments of joy with her family, the walls softened the clinical atmosphere with a warmth that spoke of the love and hope of those who visited. Yet, Mrs. Anderson herself lay still, a casualty of a tragic car accident that had robbed her of consciousness for several years. Emily paused at the threshold of Mrs. Anderson's room, taking in the sight of the woman whose fate had become intertwined with her own nightly routine. She noted the familiar setup, IV drips, monitoring equipment, and the quiet rhythm of Mrs. Anderson's breathing, a reminder of the fragility and resilience that coexisted within the confines of the hospital walls. With practiced efficiency, Emily began her shift. She checked the monitors, ensuring that the lines depicting Mrs. Anderson's vital signs remained stable and within acceptable parameters. Adjusting the IV drip, she silently communicated her intent to provide comfort and care, even to a patient who could not respond in kind. As she worked, Emily's mind wandered to the nature of her role in caring for patients like Mrs. Anderson. How does one measure the impact of care when the recipient cannot acknowledge it? These were the questions that lingered in the quiet hours of the night, prompting Emily to reflect on the complexities of her profession. It was during one of these routine checks that Emily noticed a subtle change in Mrs. Anderson's demeanor. A flicker of eyelids, a slight twitch of fingers, small movements that seemed inconsequential to the untrained eye, yet spoke volumes to Emily's keen observation. She paused, her curiosity piqued by the possibility of responsiveness from a patient deemed unresponsive for so long. Brushing aside initial skepticism, Emily found herself increasingly attuned to these fleeting moments of potential communication. She documented each observation meticulously, building a case that challenged the conventional understanding of Mrs. Anderson's condition. Driven by a growing sense of responsibility and curiosity, Emily embarked on a quest for answers. She delved into Mrs. Anderson's extensive medical history, consulting with senior nurses and specialists in neurology. Their discussions traversed the intricate pathways of the human brain, exploring theories of residual consciousness and the potential for awareness hidden beneath layers of physical impairment. In the midst of medical discourse, Emily found herself drawn to the personal anecdotes shared by Mrs. Anderson's family during occasional visits. They spoke of her love for classical music, a passion that had once filled their home with melodies that now echoed in the sterile confines of the hospital room. Armed with this newfound knowledge, Emily took a leap of faith. She began to play Mrs. Anderson's favorite pieces softly in the background during her shifts, observing subtle changes in her patient's demeanor. The music became a conduit for connection, a bridge that spanned the divide between nurse and patient, offering moments of solace in the quiet of the night. Through the rhythm of the music, Emily sensed a deeper understanding blossoming between herself and Mrs. Anderson. She discovered a shared love for the arts, a bond that transcended the boundaries of consciousness as defined by medical textbooks. One night, as Emily sat by Mrs. Anderson's bedside during a rare moment of tranquility, she witnessed something extraordinary. Mrs. Anderson's eyes fluttered open, meeting Emily's gaze with a clarity that defied medical explanation. In that fleeting moment, Emily felt a surge of emotion, a silent acknowledgement that spoke volumes of their shared journey of discovery. It was a revelation that left Emily grappling with the implications of her experience. Could it be possible that Mrs. Anderson retained a fragment of awareness hidden beneath the layers of physical limitation? The question lingered in Emily's mind, shaping her perspective on the limits of medical science and the resilience of the human spirit. As Emily navigated the complexities of her newfound understanding, she found herself confronting ethical dilemmas that tested her professional integrity. She debated the extent of interventions and the level of care appropriate for patients like Mrs. Anderson, balancing the need for compassionate support with the boundaries of medical reality. The discussions echoed within the hospital corridors, sparking debates among colleagues and healthcare professionals alike. Emily's internal struggle mirrored the broader ethical debates surrounding end-of-life care and the rights of patients unable to advocate for themselves. In the quiet moments that followed, Emily reflected on her journey with Mrs. Anderson, a journey marked by moments of connection, discovery, and deepening empathy. She realized that while Mrs. Anderson may never regain full consciousness, her presence had left an indelible mark on Emily's heart and professional identity. Through Mrs. Anderson's silent journey, Emily had found closure in knowing that even in the absence of spoken words, there existed profound opportunities for human connection and understanding. She carried forward a renewed sense of purpose, advocating for the compassionate care of patients whose voices might otherwise go unheard. In the days that followed, Emily continued to care for Mrs. Anderson with unwavering dedication and compassion. She took solace in the knowledge that Mrs. Anderson's legacy lived on not only in the memories of her loved ones, but also in the lessons learned through her silent journey. Emily paid tribute to Mrs. Anderson's resilience and the profound impact she had on her own personal and professional growth. She shared her story with colleagues and students, imparting a message of hope and empathy for patients and families navigating similar challenges. The Quiet Observer, a nurse's journey into the mind of a silent patient, has been a narrative exploration of empathy, human connection, and the complexities of consciousness in healthcare settings. Through Emily's story, we have witnessed the transformative power of compassion and the profound impact of moments that defy medical understanding. This journey serves as a reminder that even in the quietest of moments, there lies an opportunity for profound human connection and understanding that transcends words and conventional wisdom. Emily's experience with Mrs. Anderson illuminates the path forward for healthcare professionals, advocating for the compassionate care and recognition of the inherent dignity of all patients. regardless of their ability to communicate verbally. Emily's journey continues to inspire, offering a glimpse into the vast potential of the human spirit to find solace and meaning in the most unexpected places. As she continues her work at St. Catherine's Hospital, Emily carries forward the lessons learned from Mrs. Anderson, a testament to the enduring legacy of empathy and compassion in the practice of healthcare. This narrative not only highlights the emotional and ethical dilemmas faced by healthcare professionals, but also underscores the importance of listening, observing, and honoring the silent voices that shape our understanding of patient care. Thank you for being a part of Narrative Stories. Your support and engagement mean the world to us. We are committed to bringing you the best in storytelling. What kinds of stories would you like to see next? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
Hey, and thanks for tuning in to Cheating Tales Lab. We've got another awesome story for you, and we hope you enjoy every moment. So, let's jump into the story and get things rolling. Jack Reeves fumbled with his keys, the exhaustion from his 36-hour shift making even this simple task a challenge. As the lock finally gave way, he stumbled into the quiet of his home. The silence was a stark contrast to the chaos of the emergency room he'd left behind. He leaned against the closed door, eyes shut, reliving the day's triumphs. Mrs. Johnson's heart transplant had been successful. Little Timmy would walk again after that nasty car accident. Jack allowed himself a small smile. Days like these made the long hours worth it. Opening his eyes, he surveyed the dim entryway. His gaze fell on his daughter's backpack, carelessly tossed on the floor. A fond sigh escaped his lips. "Emily," he muttered, shaking his head. "When will you learn to hang this up?" He bent to pick up the bag, wincing as his back protested the movement. As he lifted it, intending to hang it on its designated hook, a small leather-bound book slipped out and hit the floor with a soft thud. Jack froze, recognizing it instantly. Emily's diary. He stared at it, warring with himself. The scout law, ingrained in him since childhood, echoed in his mind. Trustworthy, loyal. "I shouldn't," he whispered to the empty house. Yet even as the words left his mouth, his hand was reaching for the book. Something nagged at him, a feeling he couldn't quite place. Call it doctor's intuition, but something felt off. With trembling fingers, he flipped open the diary. His eyes scanned the pages, not really reading at first, just taking in his daughter's neat handwriting. Then, a phrase caught his attention, making his blood run cold. "And then second Dad took me to the science fair. He was so proud when I won first place. I wish Dad could have been there, but I know the hospital keeps him busy." Jack read the passage again and again. Each time, the words "second Dad" seemed to grow larger, mocking him. "What the hell?" he muttered, his voice barely audible. His mind raced, flipping through possibilities. A grandfather? An uncle? But no. Emily would have used those terms. This was something else. Something deliberate. He turned more pages, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. More references to this mysterious figure leapt out at him. "Second Dad helped me with my math homework. Second Dad took me for ice cream after my dentist appointment." Jack's hands were shaking now, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. How long had this been going on? How had he not noticed? The sound of a car pulling into the driveway snapped him back to reality. He snapped the diary shut, his decision made. No more secrets. No more lies. It was time for answers. Sarah's key turned in the lock, and Jack straightened, squaring his shoulders. The diary felt heavy in his hand, a damning piece of evidence. The door swung open, and Sarah walked in, her face brightening at the sight of him. "Jack, you're home early," her smile faltered as she took in his expression, her eyes flicking to the diary in his hand. The color drained from her face. "We need to talk," Jack said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Sarah's bag slipped from her shoulder, hitting the floor with a thud. "Jack, I can explain." "Can you?" Jack cut her off, his tone eerily calm. He held up the diary. "Who is second dad? Sarah?" Sarah's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. She looked like a fish out of water, gasping for air. "What I think," Jack continued, his calm exterior belying the turmoil within, "is that my daughter has been calling another man dad behind my back. What I think is that my wife has been lying to me. Am I wrong, Sarah?" Sarah's shoulders slumped, defeat written in every line of her body. "His name is Alan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Dr. Alan Blackwood. He was my professor in college." Jack felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. The room spun around him, and he had to lean against the wall to steady himself. "How long?" he managed to ask, dreading the answer. Sarah's eyes met his, filled with a mixture of guilt and defiance. 10 years. The words hit Jack like a physical blow. A decade. A whole decade of lies and betrayal. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. What could he possibly say in the face of such a betrayal? Sarah took a step toward him, her hand outstretched. "Jack, please, let me explain." "It's not what you think." Jack jerked away from her touch as if it burned. "Not what I think?" he spat, his calm finally cracking. "What exactly am I supposed to think, Sarah? That you've been having an innocent tea party with your old professor for the last 10 years? That you just happened to forget to mention it?" Sarah flinched at his words. "I never meant for it to go this far. It just happened." "Happened?" Jack's laugh was bitter. "Things like this don't just happen, Sarah. You made a choice. Every time you met him, every time you lied to me, every time you let our daughter call him Dad, you made a choice." The sound of the front door opening again cut through the tension. Margaret, Jack's mother, walked in, her arms full of groceries. Her smile froze as she took in the scene before her. "Jack? Sarah? What's going on?" Margaret asked, her eyes darting between them. Jack turned to his mother, ready to explain, when he caught the flicker of guilt that crossed her face. His eyes narrowed. "You knew," he said, his voice filled with disbelief and anger. Margaret set the groceries down, her hands trembling slightly. "Jack, please, let me explain." "Explain what, Mom?" Jack's voice rose, filling the small entryway. "Explain that you've been covering for Sarah's affair? That you've been lying to me too?" Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, unable to speak. Jack's laugh was hollow, devoid of any humor. "How long have you known?" I found out a few years ago," Margaret admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I kept quiet to protect the family. I thought if I ignored it, it might go away." Jack shook his head, disgust evident in his expression. "Protect the family? By lying to me? By letting my daughter call another man Dad?" Sarah stepped forward, reaching out to Jack again. "Please, Jack, let's talk about this. I know I've made mistakes, but we can work through this. For Emily's sake, if nothing else." Jack jerked away from her touch once more. "Mistakes? A decade-long affair isn't a mistake, Sarah. It's a choice. A choice you made every single day for 10 years. He turned to Margaret. "And you're supposed to be my mother. How could you keep this from me?" Margaret's tears were flowing freely now. "I'm so sorry, Jack. I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't want to see our family torn apart." "Well, congratulations, Mom," Jack said bitterly. "You've succeeded spectacularly. Our family isn't torn apart. It's obliterated." With that, he pushed past them both, heading for the stairs. He needed to be alone, to process this betrayal that seemed to infect every aspect of his life. "Jack, wait," Sarah called after him. "Where are you going? We need to talk about this." Jack paused on the stairs, not turning back. "I'm going to check on our daughter. The one person in this house who hasn't been lying to me for years." His voice was cold, detached. "Don't follow me. I can't even look at either of you right now." As he climbed the stairs, he could hear Sarah's muffled sobs and his mother's attempts at consolation. But he felt nothing. The shock was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. He didn't know if he'd ever be able to feel anything for them again. In the days that followed, Jack's world crumbled around him. He threw himself into his work, performing back-to-back surgeries with laser-like focus. The operating room became his sanctuary, the one place where the chaos in his personal life couldn't touch him. His colleagues noticed the change in him. The usual warmth in his eyes was replaced by a steely determination. His easy smile was now a line of concentration, but they attributed it to his legendary dedication, not knowing the turmoil that lay beneath the surface. Dr. Thompson, the head of surgery, stopped him in the hallway after his third consecutive shift. "Jack, you've been here for 72 hours straight. Go home, get some rest." Jack's smile didn't reach his eyes as he replied, "I'm fine, sir. There's always more work to be done." Dr. Thompson frowned, concern etching lines on his forehead. "Jack, I admire your dedication, but you're no good to your patients if you're exhausted. Take a break." "That's an order." Jack nodded, knowing he couldn't argue. But the thought of going home filled him with dread. Home was no longer a sanctuary. It was a battlefield. As he drove home, his mind wandered to the confrontations that awaited him. Sarah had been trying to corner him for days, attempting to explain, to justify her actions. But how could anyone justify a decade of lies? He pulled into the driveway, steeling himself for what was to come. As soon as he stepped through the door, Sarah was there, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Jack, please," she began, her voice hoarse. "We need to talk about this. I know what I did was wrong, but you have to understand. Your work, you were always at the hospital. I felt so alone." Jack's eyes were cold as he looked at her. "So you decided to sleep with your professor? To let him play daddy to our daughter? Tell me, Sarah, how exactly am I supposed to understand that?" Sarah flinched at his words. "I never meant for it to go this far. It just happened. Alan was there when you weren't. He listened, he cared, and I didn't." Jack interrupted, his voice rising. "I was saving lives, Sarah. I was working to provide for our family. And all this time, you were, what? Playing happy families with your lover?" Sarah's face crumpled. "It wasn't like that, Jack. I love you. I've always loved you. Alan he was a mistake. A horrible, terrible mistake." Jack shook his head, disgust evident in his expression. "A mistake is forgetting to buy milk, Sarah. A mistake is being late for a dinner reservation. What you did, that's not a mistake. That's a choice. A choice you made every day for 10 years. He pushed past her, heading for the stairs. He needed to see Emily, the one person in this house who hadn't betrayed him. He found Emily sitting alone in her room, her eyes red from crying. His heart broke at the sight. In all the chaos, he hadn't stopped to think how this was affecting her. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly, sitting next to her on the bed. "How are you holding up?" Emily's lower lip trembled. "Is this my fault, Dad? Because I wrote about him in my diary?" Jack pulled her into a tight hug, his own eyes stinging with unshed tears. "No, absolutely not. None of this is your fault, Emily. You hear me? This is about choices that adults made, not you." Emily clung to him, her small body shaking with sobs. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to call him Dad," he said. "He said it would make Mom happy." Jack's jaw clenched at her words, but he kept his voice gentle. "You have nothing to be sorry for, Emily. You did nothing wrong. The adults in your life, we're the ones who messed up. But I promise you, we're going to fix this. Somehow." As Emily's sobs subsided, Jack felt a renewed sense of determination. He would get through this, for her sake if nothing else. He might not know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He would do whatever it took to protect his daughter from the fallout of this betrayal. That evening, as Jack sat in his study, trying to make sense of the chaos his life had become, his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number, but something told him to answer. "Hello? Jack? This is Alan Blackwood." Jack's grip on the phone tightened, his knuckles turning white. The voice on the other end was smooth, almost condescending. It took every ounce of Jack's self-control not to hang up immediately. "What do you want?" he managed to grit out. I think it's time we discuss this situation like gentlemen, don't you? Blackwood's tone was infuriatingly calm, as if they were discussing nothing more consequential than the weather. Jack's jaw clenched so hard he thought his teeth might crack. Fine, he spat out. Name the time and place. As he hung up, Jack's mind was already formulating a plan. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Blackwood might think he had the upper hand, but Jack was just getting started. He would protect his daughter, salvage what was left of his family, and make sure Blackwood paid for his part in this betrayal. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges he never thought he'd have to face. But Jack Reeves was no stranger to adversity. He'd fought to save lives in the operating room, against impossible odds. Now, he would fight for his family, for his daughter, for his very sense of self. As he looked out the window at the setting sun, Jack felt a strange calm settle over him. The storm of emotions that had been raging inside him for days quieted, replaced by a steely resolve. Whatever came next, he would face it head-on. He was Dr. Jack Reeves, and he didn't back down from a fight. The ambulance sirens pierced the night, their urgent wails growing louder as they approached County General Hospital. Dr. Jack Reeves stood at the emergency room entrance, his face a mask of determination. The call had come in 15 minutes ago, a devastating multi-car pileup on the highway, multiple critical injuries, all hands on deck. As the first ambulance screeched to a halt, Jack's mind snapped into focus. The chaos of his personal life faded into the background. Here, in this moment, he was Dr. Reeves, trauma surgeon. Nothing else mattered. What have we got? Jack barked as the EMTs rushed the first stretcher towards him. Male, mid-30s, severe head trauma and possible internal bleeding. One of the EMTs rattled off. BP's dropping fast. Jack's hands were already moving, assessing the patient as they wheeled him inside. Get him 2 or 3. Page Dr. Sanderson for neuroconsult. Move. For the next several hours, Jack was a whirlwind of activity. He moved from one critical patient to another, barking orders, performing intricate surgeries, making split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death. In or two, elbow deep in a patient's chest cavity, Jack felt a bead of sweat trickle down his forehead. Suction, he commanded, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. We've got a bleeder here. As he worked to repair the torn aorta, Jack's mind flashed briefly to Sarah, to the betrayal that had shattered his world. He pushed the thought away, focusing on the task at hand. He couldn't save his marriage, but he could save this life. Hours blended together as Jack moved from one emergency to the next. He was vaguely aware of the nurses murmuring in awe at his stamina, his laser-like focus. Let them talk. This was what he was born to do. As the crisis began to subside, Jack stepped out of the OR, peeling off his bloody gloves. He rolled his shoulders, feeling the ache of exhaustion setting in. But there was no time to rest. More patients needed him. He was heading towards the next, or when he spotted a familiar figure in the hallway. His steps faltered as he recognized Dr. Alan Blackwood, the man who had been playing second dad to his daughter for years. Blackwood was standing with another doctor, engaged in what appeared to be a casual conversation, as if he hadn't torn apart a family, as if he had every right to be here. Their eyes met across the bustling ER. Blackwood's lips curled into a smirk, a look of smug superiority that made Jack's blood boil. Jack's hands clenched at his sides, the urge to wipe that smirk off Blackwood's face with his fist nearly overwhelming. For a moment, Jack saw red. He imagined striding across the room, grabbing Blackwood by his expensive collar, and slamming him against the wall. He could almost feel the satisfying crunch of the man's nose breaking under his fist. But then a nurse's voice cut through his violent fantasy. Dr. Reeves, we need you in or 4. It's critical. Jack blinked, the red haze receding. He took a deep breath, unclenching his fists. With a last, cold look at Blackwood, he turned and strode towards or 4. He had lives to save. Blackwood could wait. As Jack scrubbed in for yet another surgery, he forced himself to focus. Push away the anger, the betrayal, the hurt. Channel it all into saving lives. That's what he did best. That's what he could control. Hours later, as the sun began to peek over the horizon, Jack finally emerged from the OR. The crisis was over. They had lost 2 patients, but saved many more. It was a victory, albeit a bittersweet one. As he headed towards the locker room, dead on his feet, a voice called out to him, "Dr. Reeves? A word, please." Jack turned to see Dr. Harrison, the hospital administrator, beckoning him into his office. With a weary nod, Jack followed him in. "Remarkable work tonight, Jack," Dr. Harrison began, his tone grave despite the praise. "You saved a lot of lives." "Just doing my job," Jack replied, too tired for false modesty. "About that," Dr. Harrison continued, his expression turning grim, "I'm afraid I have some bad news. The board has decided that due to budget cuts, we need to eliminate 1 senior surgeon position." Jack felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. After everything he'd been through, after the hell of the past few days, now this? "I see," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "And I suppose I'm on the chopping block?" Dr. Harrison spread his hands in a helpless gesture. "Nothing's been decided yet, but I wanted to give you a heads up. The board will be reviewing all senior staff over the next week. I suggest you prepare to defend your position." Jack nodded, his mind already racing. He'd have to fight to keep his job, all while his personal life was in shambles. But he was Dr. Jack Reeves. He didn't back down from a fight. "Thank you for letting me know," he said, standing up. "If there's nothing else?" As he left Dr. Harrison's office, Jack's exhaustion was tinged with a new determination. He'd been backed into a corner, both personally and professionally. But he wasn't going down without a fight. Not by a long shot. The park was quiet in the early evening, the fading sunlight casting long shadows across the carefully manicured lawns. Jack Reeves sat on a bench, his posture rigid, eyes scanning the path. He checked his watch for the 3rd time in as many minutes. Blackwood was late. Typical. As if summoned by Jack's impatience, a figure appeared on the path. Dr. Alan Blackwood strolled towards the bench, his silver hair catching the last rays of sunlight. His walk was unhurried, almost leisurely, as if he were out for an evening constitutional rather than a confrontation. Jack's jaw clenched as Blackwood approached. The man's casual demeanor, his air of smug superiority, made Jack's blood boil. But he forced himself to remain seated, to maintain his outward calm. He wouldn't give Blackwood the satisfaction of seeing him lose control. "Jack, my boy," Blackwood said as he reached the bench, his tone infuriatingly patronizing. "So good of you to meet me here. Lovely evening, isn't it?" Jack didn't respond, merely gestured for Blackwood to sit. The older man lowered himself onto the bench, arranging his expensive coat around him with fastidious care. "Now then," Blackwood began, a condescending smile playing on his lips, "I think it's time we discuss this situation like gentlemen. Don't you agree?" Jack remained silent, his eyes fixed on Blackwood's face. Let the bastard talk. Let him dig his own grave. Blackwood, seemingly unperturbed by Jack's silence, continued. "I understand you're upset. It's a natural reaction. But I think, if you look at this objectively, you'll see that there's a way for all of us to benefit from this situation." Jack's eyebrow raised slightly, the only outward sign of his incredulity. Benefit? From his wife's infidelity? From the betrayal of his family? He was curious to see how Blackwood would spin this. "You see," Blackwood went on, warming to his theme, "Sarah and Emily, they need me. I've been a part of their lives for so long now. And you, Jack, well, let's be honest. Your work keeps you away so much. They need a stable presence in their lives." Jack's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white with the effort of restraining himself. "But still," he said nothing. "What I'm proposing," Blackwood said, leaning in conspiratorially, "is an arrangement. I continue to see Sarah and Emily. I can be there for them when you can't. Think of it as a support system. For your family." The audacity of the suggestion nearly took Jack's breath away. For a moment, he was speechless with rage. But then, something shifted inside him. A cold, clear anger replaced the hot fury that had been burning in his chest. When Jack finally spoke, his voice was soft, but there was steel beneath the quiet tone. "An arrangement," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "That's an interesting proposal, Alan. May I call you Alan?" Blackwood nodded. a look of relief crossing his face. He clearly thought Jack was coming around to his way of thinking. "Let me counter with an arrangement of my own," Jack continued, his voice still dangerously soft. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk away. From Sarah, from Emily, from my family. You're going to disappear from our lives so completely it'll be like you never existed." Blackwood's smug smile faltered. "Now, Jack, be reasonable." "I'm not finished," Jack cut him off, his tone brooking no argument. "If you don't, I will destroy you. I will report you to the University Ethics Board. I will provide evidence of your inappropriate relationship with a student. Yes, Alan, I have evidence. And I will ensure that your academic career ends in disgrace." The color drained from Blackwood's face as Jack laid out his plan in excruciating detail. The older man's arrogance crumbled, replaced by a look of dawning horror as he realized the precariousness of his position. "You can't," Blackwood began, but Jack cut him off again. "I can, and I will, unless you do exactly as I say." Blackwood's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. He looked like a fish out of water, gasping for air. But what about Sarah? What about Emily?" Blackwood finally managed to sputter. "They need me." Jack stood up, looming over the seated man. "What they need," he said, his voice cold, "is for you to disappear. You've done enough damage. It's time for you to go." With that, Jack turned and walked away, leaving Blackwood sputtering threats and pleas behind him. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He knew he'd won this round. As he strode out of the park, Jack felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time since discovering Sarah's betrayal, he felt in control. Blackwood had thought he held all the cards, but Jack had just shown him how wrong he was. Now, it was time to turn his attention to the next battle. His job at the hospital was on the line, and he'd be damned if he was going to lose that too. With renewed determination, Jack headed home to prepare for the fight ahead. The conference room was silent as Jack Reeves stepped up to the podium. The review board members sat in a semicircle before him, their faces impassive. Jack could feel the weight of their scrutiny, the unspoken pressure of what was at stake. He took a deep breath, centering himself. He'd spent the last week preparing for this moment, poring over hospital records, analyzing efficiency reports, crafting a plan that would not only save his job but revolutionize the ER. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Jack began, his voice steady and confident. "I stand before you today not just to defend my position, but to present a vision for the future of our emergency room." As Jack launched into his presentation, he could see the board members' expressions shift from polite interest to genuine engagement. He laid out his comprehensive plan to improve ER efficiency and reduce costs, his words painting a picture of a streamlined, cutting-edge emergency department that would set new standards in patient care. By implementing these changes, Jack continued, clicking through his meticulously prepared slides, we can reduce wait times by 30%, increase patient satisfaction by 25%, and most importantly, save more lives. He saw Dr. Harrison, the hospital administrator, lean forward, his brow furrowed in concentration. The other board members were scribbling notes, nodding along with Jack's points. As Jack neared the end of his presentation, he felt a surge of confidence. He'd given them something to think about, something that went beyond simply justifying his own position. He was offering them a way to transform the entire emergency department. In conclusion, Jack said, his voice ringing with conviction, "I believe that by adopting these measures, we can not only weather the current budget crisis but emerge stronger, more efficient, and better equipped to serve our community." "Thank you." As Jack finished speaking, a murmur of discussion broke out among the board members. Dr. Harrison opened his mouth, presumably to begin the questioning phase of the review, when suddenly, a shrill alarm cut through the air. "Code blue in the ER." A voice announced over the intercom, "Code blue in the ER." Without hesitation, Jack turned to the board. "I apologize, but I'm needed downstairs. Lives are at stake." Before anyone could object, Jack was out the door, racing towards the emergency room. As he ran, he could hear footsteps behind him. The board members were following. Jack burst into the ER to find chaos. A patient on a gurney was convulsing, surrounded by frantic nurses. "What's the situation?" Jack barked, already moving towards the patient. Male, 50s, cardiac arrest, a nurse reported. We've been doing CPR for 10 minutes. No response. Jack's mind kicked into high gear, assessing the situation in seconds. Get me the defibrillator, he ordered. Already starting chest compressions. Push one of AP. As he worked, Jack was vaguely aware of the board members watching from the doorway. But his focus was entirely on the patient. Nothing else mattered. Clear. Jack called, applying the defibrillator paddles. The patient's body jerked with the shock, but the heart monitor continued its ominous flatline. Again, Jack commanded, resuming compressions. Come on, don't give up on me now. Minutes ticked by, feeling like hours. Jack's arms ached from the constant compressions, sweat beading on his forehead. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Clear, he called again, delivering another shock. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, miraculously, a beep. Then another. The heart monitor sprang to life, showing a weak but steady rhythm. We've got a pulse, Jack announced, his voice hoarse with exertion and relief. Get him to the ICU, Stat. As the nurses wheeled the patient away, Jack finally allowed himself to breathe. He turned to find the entire review board staring at him, their expressions a mix of awe and respect. Dr. Harrison stepped forward, a smile breaking across his usually stern face. Dr. Reeves, he said, I think we've seen all we need to see. Your position is safe. In fact, if you're amenable, we'd like to offer you the position of head of emergency surgery. Jack blinked, the words taking a moment to register through his post-adrenaline haze. Thank you, sir, he managed to say. I'd be honored. As the news spread through the hospital, Jack found himself surrounded by congratulating colleagues. Nurses patted him on the back. Fellow doctors shook his hand. In that moment, Jack felt a surge of pride and accomplishment that he hadn't experienced in a long time. But even as he accepted the congratulations, a part of Jack's mind was already moving forward. He had secured his professional future, yes, but there was still work to be done. His personal life was still in shambles, and he had no intention of letting Blackwood or Sarah off the hook. As he headed to his office to change out of his sweat-soaked scrubs, Jack's mind was already formulating his next move. He had won this battle, but the war was far from over, and Jack Reeves was just getting started. Jack Reeves sat in his dimly lit study, surrounded by stacks of papers and file folders. The soft glow of his laptop screen illuminated his face, casting shadows that accentuated the lines of exhaustion etched there. He rubbed his eyes, bleary from hours of poring over financial records and emails. It had been 3 weeks since his confrontation with Blackwood in the park. 3 weeks of sleepless nights and caffeine-fueled days. But Jack was nothing if not methodical. He would build his case brick by brick, leaving no stone unturned. He reached for his phone, dialing a number he'd come to know by heart. Daniel's Investigations, a gruff voice answered on the second ring. It's Reeves, Jack said, his voice low. Any updates? Yeah, Doc. Got some juicy stuff for you. Your wife and the professor met again yesterday. Got it all on camera this time. Jack's jaw clenched. Even after everything, even after he'd made it clear to Blackwood to stay away, they were still seeing each other. Send me everything, he said, his tone clipped. As he hung up, Jack's eyes fell on a framed photo on his desk. It was from happier times. Him, Sarah, and Emily at the beach, all smiles and sunburned noses. He turned the framed face down with a heavy sigh. Turning back to his laptop, Jack pulled up the financial records he'd been combing through. Credit card statements, bank transfers, even receipts Sarah had carelessly left lying around. It was all there in black and white, years of misused family funds, funneled into supporting her affair with Blackwood. A hotel room here, an expensive dinner there. Gifts that Jack now realized were never for him. It made him sick to his stomach, but it wasn't just about the money. Jack had been reaching out to Blackwood's former students, carefully and discreetly. The pattern that emerged was disturbing. Blackwood had a history of inappropriate relationships with students, stretching back years. He'd just been clever enough to keep it quiet. Until now, a knock at the study door startled Jack from his thoughts. Come in, he called, hastily minimizing the windows on his screen. Emily poked her head in, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. Dad, can I talk to you? Jack's heart clenched. In his laser focus on building his case, had he been neglecting his daughter? Of course, sweetheart. Come here. Emily shuffled in, curling up in the armchair across from Jack's desk. She looked small, vulnerable. Jack waited patiently for her to speak. Is Mom coming back? Emily finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack sighed. How could he explain this to a child? I don't know, Emily. Your mom and I. We have a lot to work through. Emily nodded, picking at a loose thread on her pajama sleeve. And Dr. Blackwood? Is he going to be my dad now? The question hit Jack like a physical blow. He was around the desk in an instant, kneeling in front of Emily and taking her small hands in his. Listen to me, Emily. I am your dad. The only dad you need. No one, not Dr. Blackwood, not anyone, is ever going to change that. Do you understand? Emily nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Jack pulled her into a tight hug, his own eyes stinging. As he held his daughter, he felt his resolve harden. He would see this through, not just for himself, but for Emily. Later that night, after Emily had gone to bed, Jack found himself staring at his phone again. He scrolled through his contacts, finger hovering over a name he hadn't called in years. Mike Hawkins, his oldest friend, a detective with the police department. Before he could talk himself out of it, Jack hit the call button. Jack? Mike's voice was surprised but warm. It's been a while, buddy. Everything okay? Jack took a deep breath. Mike, I need your help. And I need a friend. Over the next hour, Jack poured out the whole sordid story. The affair, the betrayal, the evidence he'd been gathering. Mike listened in silence, only occasionally asking for clarification. When Jack finally finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Jesus, Jack, Mike finally said. I had no idea. Why didn't you call me sooner? I don't know, Jack admitted. Pride, maybe. Shame. I needed to handle it on my own. Well, you're not alone anymore, Mike said firmly. Listen, what you're doing, building this case, it's smart, but you need to be careful. This Blackwood guy sounds like a real piece of work, and if he's as connected as you say, he could be dangerous. Jack nodded, even though Mike couldn't see him. I know. That's why I called you. I need advice, Mike. Legal advice, sure, but I also need to know I'm not crazy, that I'm doing the right thing here. You're not crazy, Jack, Mike assured him. And from where I'm sitting, you're handling this about as well as anyone could. But listen, you need to be prepared for how ugly this could get. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Jack's eyes fell on the face-down photo frame. For a moment, he saw Emily's tear-stained face in his mind. His jaw set. I'm sure, he said. I have to see this through. For Emily's sake, if nothing else. All right, Mike said. Then let's do this right. Here's what you need to do. As Mike laid out a plan of action, Jack felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He wasn't alone in this fight anymore. And with Mike's help, he would make sure that Blackwood and Sarah faced the consequences of their actions. The game was far from over, but Jack Reeves was finally ready to make his move. The conference room at the Hilton was uncomfortably quiet. Jack Reeves sat at the head of the long table, his face an impassive mask. To his right sat Mike Hawkins, a thick folder in front of him. Across from them, Sarah fidgeted nervously, her eyes darting between Jack and the door. The tension in the room ratcheted up a notch as the door opened. Alan Blackwood strode in, his silver hair immaculately styled, a confident smile on his face. That smile faltered as he took in the scene before him. What's going on here? Blackwood demanded, his eyes narrowing as he spotted Mike. Who's this? Please, have a seat, Alan, Jack said, his voice eerily calm. All will be explained shortly. As if on cue, the door opened again. A distinguished-looking man in his 60s entered, followed by a woman about Blackwood's age and a sharp-eyed man in an expensive suit. Dean Hartley, Jack said, nodding to the older man. Mrs. Blackwood, Mr. Thompson. Thank you all for coming. Please, be seated. Blackwood's face had gone pale. Jack, what is the meaning of this? He sputtered. Jack leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. We're here to work things out, Alan. Isn't that what you wanted? To discuss our arrangement? Sarah's head snapped up at that, her eyes wide with panic. Alan, what is he talking about? Jack didn't give Blackwood a chance to respond. Let me explain, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the room. For the past decade, my wife Sarah has been carrying on an affair with Dr. Blackwood here. An affair that began when Sarah was his student. Dean Hartley's bushy eyebrows shot up. Mrs. Blackwood let out a small gasp. That's preposterous, Blackwood blustered. You have no proof. Oh, but I do. Jack cut him off smoothly. He nodded to Mike, who began laying out photos on the table. Photos of Sarah and Blackwood together, in various compromising positions. Hotel receipts, bank statements, financial records showing how my wife has been funneling our family's money to support this affair, Jack continued, his voice never rising above a conversational tone, and statements from several of Dr. Blackwood's former students, detailing a pattern of inappropriate relationships stretching back years. The color had drained from Blackwood's face. Sarah was openly weeping now, her head in her hands. This is a setup, Blackwood tried, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Jack asked mildly. He turned to Dean Hartley. Dean, I believe you'll find all the evidence you need here to conduct a full ethics inquiry. Mr. Thompson can advise you on the legal implications. The lawyer nodded, already leafing through the documents with a grim expression. Alan, Mrs. Blackwood spoke up, her voice trembling. Is this true? All of it. Blackwood opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Margaret, I can explain. But Jack wasn't done. Oh, there's more, he said, his eyes glinting. Sarah, would you like to explain to everyone how you've been embezzling funds from your research grant to pay for your little rendezvous? Sarah's head snapped up, her tear-streaked face a mask of horror. Jack, please, she begged. Don't do this. Do what, Sarah? Jack asked, his calm facade finally cracking. Tell the truth? Isn't that what you should have done years ago? The room descended into chaos. Blackwood and Sarah began shouting accusations at each other, their masks of civility finally shattering. Mrs. Blackwood dissolved into tears. Dean Hartley and Mr. Thompson huddled together, speaking in urgent whispers as they pored over the evidence. Through it all, Jack sat silent, watching the destruction he'd wrought. He felt no joy, no satisfaction, just a bone-deep weariness and a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, this nightmare was finally coming to an end. As the shouting reached a fever pitch, Mike leaned over to Jack. You okay, buddy? He asked quietly. Jack nodded, his eyes never leaving the scene before him. I will be, he said. Let's finish this. With that, Jack stood, silencing the room with his presence. I think we're done here, he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Dean Hartley, Mr. Thompson, I trust you have what you need. Mrs. Blackwood, I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Sarah, he paused, meeting his wife's tear-filled eyes. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce proceedings. Without another word, Jack turned and walked out of the room, Mike close behind him. As the door closed, he could hear the chaos erupting again behind him. But for the first time in months, Jack felt a sense of peace. The trap had been sprung. Now, all that was left was to deal with the aftermath. The university auditorium was packed, a low murmur of voices filling the air. At the front, a panel of stern-faced administrators sat behind a long table, and in the center, looking small and defeated, sat Dr. Alan Blackwood. Jack Reeves watched from the back of the room, his face impassive. He debated whether to attend this ethics inquiry at all, but in the end, he felt he needed to see it through. To witness the final act of this sordid drama, the head of the ethics committee, a severe-looking woman with steel-gray hair, called the room to order. Dr. Blackwood, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed auditorium. You stand accused of multiple ethical violations, including inappropriate relationships with students and misuse of university resources. How do you plead? Blackwood, his once proud shoulders now slumped, barely raised his head. I cannot deny the charges, he said, his voice barely audible. A collective gasp went through the room. Jack felt a grim satisfaction. Blackwood had finally run out of lies. What followed was a thorough and damning presentation of evidence: emails, witness statements, financial records. With each new revelation, Blackwood seemed to shrink further into himself. When it was over, the verdict was swift and unequivocal. Blackwood's tenure was revoked. His academic career lay in tatters. As security escorted him from the room, his eyes met Jack's for a brief moment. There was no anger there, no defiance, just a haunted, empty look that almost made Jack pity him. Almost. As Jack left the auditorium, his phone buzzed. A text from Mike. "It's done. Sarah's out." Jack allowed himself a small smile. Sarah's own ethics inquiry at her research institute had concluded. Like Blackwood, she'd been found guilty of ethical violations and financial misconduct. Her career as a researcher was over. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and court appearances. Jack's lawyer, armed with the mountain of evidence he'd gathered, presented an ironclad case for divorce. Sarah, her fight gone, barely contested it. The final hearing was mercifully brief. As the judge delivered her ruling, Jack felt a weight he'd been carrying for months finally lift from his shoulders. In light of the evidence presented, the judge said, her tone grave, "This court grants the petition for divorce." Furthermore, given the extent of Mrs. Reeves' infidelity and financial misconduct, the court awards full custody of the minor child, Emily Reeves, to Dr. Jack Reeves. Sarah let out a choked sob from across the courtroom, but Jack didn't look at her. His thoughts were only of Emily, of the future they would build together. As he left the courthouse, Jack was surprised to find a small crowd of reporters waiting. Word of the scandal had spread, it seemed. "Dr. Reeves," one called out, "how do you feel about the verdict?" Jack paused, considering his words carefully. "I'm grateful that justice has been served," he said finally. "But more than that, I'm looking forward to moving on with my life and focusing on what really matters, my daughter." Another reporter pushed forward. "There are rumors that the hospital wants you to join their ethics committee. Any comment?" Jack blinked, taken aback. This was the first he'd heard of it. But as he thought about it, a slow smile spread across his face. "If that's true," he said, "I'd be honored. After everything that's happened, I think ensuring ethical behavior in our institutions is more important than ever." As the reporters clamored for more, Jack politely excused himself. He had somewhere more important to be. An hour later, Jack stood in the driveway of a modest suburban home, Emily's small hand clasped in his. A sold sign swung gently in the breeze. "Well, what do you think?" Jack asked, looking down at his daughter. "Is this going to be a good new home for us?" Emily looked up at him, a tentative smile on her face. "It's nice," she said, "but it's going to be different, isn't it? Without Mom." Jack knelt down, bringing himself to Emily's eye level. "It is going to be different," he admitted. "But different doesn't have to mean bad. We're going to make this our home, you and me. And I promise you, Emily, I'm going to be here for you. Always." Emily's smile grew a little stronger. "I know, Dad," she said. Then, unexpectedly, she threw her arms around Jack's neck in a fierce hug. "You're the only dad I need," she whispered. Jack hugged her back just as tightly, feeling the sting of tears in his eyes. For the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope, of healing. As they broke apart, Jack stood and ruffled Emily's hair. "Come on," he said, fishing the new house keys out of his pocket. "Let's go check out your new room." Hand in hand, father and daughter walked up the path to their new home. Behind them, the sun was setting, painting the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks. It was, Jack thought, a fitting end to this chapter of their lives. And as he opened the door to their new home, Jack Reeves felt ready, at last, to begin writing the next one.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.